At my father's funeral, the priest leaned close and whispered, "Don't go home." He surreptitiously slipped a piece of paper into my pocket that read Pier 9, midnight, come alone. My phone vibrated rapid fire. My husband texted demanding I come home right now and asking what the priest gave me. I looked over, he was still wearing that perfect smile, but his eyes were cold and calculating. This chilling coincidence made my blood run cold, triggering a deep instinctive dread. I disobeyed and fled to the pier at midnight, and what I found inside my father's fingerprint-locked box exposed a lethal plot. Thank you for listening. Before we begin, leave a quick comment. What are you doing right now while you listen? Driving, working, or winding down? I read every comment and your presence here matters. Just a note. This story includes fictionalized details for storytelling and reflection. The message, the heart of it, is what I hope stays with you. At my father's funeral, the priest leaned close and whispered, "Don't go home." I didn't understand him. I barely heard him over the ship horns echoing across San Francisco Bay, carrying fog so thick I could taste salt and decay. My father's casket stood before me, polished mahogany, gleaming wet from drizzle. Leonard Mercer, 68 years old, founder of Mercer Shipping, lay inside wearing his Navy suit. 2 months of illness had stolen him piece by piece until nothing remained but this body and a $50 million empire I was only now learning to run. I should have been crying. That's what daughters do at their father's funerals. But I stood there dry-eyed, numb, wondering what was wrong with me. Desmond Cross, my husband of 3 years, stood beside me in an impeccable charcoal suit. At 42, he looked 10 years younger, all sharp edges and controlled elegance. His hand found my shoulder with that familiar proprietary touch that made my skin crawl for reasons I couldn't name. He'd been perfect all morning. Perfect condolences, perfect handshakes, perfect words about loss and legacy. "Your father built an empire," someone said. A woman I didn't recognize dabbing at her eyes. "Such a legacy." I nodded. That's all I seemed capable of. Nodding, standing, not crying. Desmond leaned in, his cologne mixing with funeral flowers and ocean spray. "You're doing beautifully, darling. Just a little longer, then we can go home." Home. The Pacific Heights mansion that had been my father's, then mine, then somehow became ours when we married. 3 years ago, I'd thought I was the luckiest woman alive. Now I couldn't remember the last time I'd made a decision without checking with my husband first. 3 days since father died. 3 days I'd been waiting to cry. 3 days Desmond had been watching me with that concerned expression, suggesting maybe I should see someone, because wasn't it strange that I seemed so detached? Maybe he was right, maybe I was losing my mind. The crowd thinned as mourners filed toward the parking area, umbrellas blooming against the fog. That's when Father Thomas approached. 71 years old, a longtime friend of my father's, he'd led the service with trembling liver-spotted hands and kept finding my eyes throughout with a look that wasn't priestly comfort, but something desperate. "Mrs. Cross," he said, taking my hand in both of his. They were cold, shaking. "I'm so sorry for your loss. Your father was a good man." Standard funeral language. But then he leaned closer and pressed a folded piece of paper into my palm. His lips barely moved. "Don't go home. Pier 9, midnight. Come alone." I stared at him. He straightened, still holding my hand, speaking louder now. "He loved you very much, Mrs. Cross. Never doubt that." Then he was gone, moving toward Desmond, leaving me with paper burning against my palm. I waited until I was alone before unfolding it. The handwriting was shaky, but clear. Pier 9. Midnight. Come alone, don't go home. The truth is inside. Truth is. The truth about what? My phone vibrated, once, twice, 3 times in rapid succession. 3 texts from Desmond, each more urgent than the last. "Come home now. Don't listen to anyone at the church. Lawyers waiting. Urgent. Leora, right now, this is important." I looked up. Desmond stood 20 paces away, phone in hand, watching me, that perfect smile still on his face. But even through the fog, I could see his eyes weren't smiling. They were cold, calculating, waiting. Did I still trust my own mind, or had 3 years of marriage taught me to doubt every instinct I had? Because right now, every instinct was screaming that something was wrong. that the timing of these texts arriving the exact moment Father Thomas handed me that note wasn't coincidence. Another text, I can see you reading something. What did he give you? My hands went cold. How could he know Father Thomas had given me something unless he was watching? Not just watching now, but watching closely enough to see a folded paper change hands in the fog. I glanced at my phone. Location services. On. Always on because Desmond said it made him feel better to know I was safe. Said it was protection, not surveillance. 4 more texts came rapid fire. Leora, answer me. What did the priest give you? Come home now. I looked at Desmond again. He'd stopped pretending to comfort mourners. He was just standing there, phone in hand, staring at me. That smile still perfect. That suit still impeccable. But those eyes, they weren't the eyes of a concerned husband. They were the eyes of someone who'd been caught watching. I'd been married to Desmond Cross for 3 years. 3 years of him knowing exactly where I was at all times. 3 years of him suggesting I was too emotional, too irrational, too detached. 3 years of slowly, carefully teaching me to doubt myself. And standing there in the rain with my father's body behind me and Father Thomas's note in my hand, I suddenly realized I'd never really known who he was. The fog rolled thicker, swallowing everything but the man 20 paces away with his phone and his perfect smile and his cold, watching eyes. Father Thomas's note, don't go home. Desmond's text, come home right now. One of them was lying. One of them was telling me the truth I needed to hear. And I had exactly 4 hours to midnight to figure out which one, because whatever was waiting at Pier 9 was either my salvation or the biggest mistake I'd ever make. My phone vibrated again. Desmond's name on the screen. I could feel him watching, waiting to see if I'd answer. I didn't. Instead, I folded Father Thomas's note and slipped it into my purse, right next to the phone that was telling my husband exactly where I was every second of every day. The rain fell harder. The ship horn sounded again, lonely and distant. And somewhere in the fog, a clock was ticking toward midnight. I turned my car north toward the industrial port, instead of south toward home, the first time in 3 years I'd disobeyed my husband. My hands shook on the steering wheel as I pulled out of the church parking lot. Father Thomas's note burned in my purse. Desmond's texts kept lighting up my phone on the passenger seat, each one more demanding than the last. But I didn't turn around. I didn't go home. I drove into the fog that was rolling thick off San Francisco Bay, and for the first time since I'd married Desmond Cross, I made a choice that was entirely my own. Within seconds, headlights appeared in my rearview mirror. His black Tesla, sleek and fast, pulling out from where he'd been waiting, watching, always watching. My phone rang. Desmond's name on the screen. I didn't answer. Another text, where are you going? Turn around now. I gripped the wheel tighter and kept driving. North through the financial district, through streets I'd known my whole life, toward the industrial waterfront where my father's shipping containers sat stacked like metal mountains in the fog. The Tesla stayed behind me close enough that I could see Desmond's silhouette through the windshield, not close enough to force me to stop. Not yet. Father Thomas knew something, I whispered to myself, something worth warning me about. The port district materialized out of the fog. Massive cranes towering overhead, like prehistoric creatures shipping containers, creating a maze of 40-foot steel walls painted in rust and corporate logos. My father's world. The empire he'd built from nothing, and that Desmond had been helping me run since father got sick. Sick, that's what we'd called it. Heart failure, the doctors said. But 2 months of watching him fade, watching him grow weaker and thinner and more confused, watching him try to tell me something during those last visits before Desmond would gently suggest I let father rest. Desmond's headlights blazed brighter behind me, closer now. I made a sharp right between 2 container stacks, killed my headlights, and slid into a gap barely wide enough for my sedan. Engine off, lights off, holding my breath in the sudden darkness. The Tesla's engine growled past 15 feet away, headlights cutting through fog like searchlights. I could see Desmond's profile through his window phone pressed to his ear neck, tense. Then he was gone, swallowed by fog and the maze of containers. I sat there in the dark, heart hammering so hard I could hear it over the distant sound of ship horns across the bay. This is insane, I whispered. I'm hiding from my own husband like a criminal. But Father Thomas had said, don't go home. He'd said it with desperation in his eyes. And Desmond's texts had arrived the instant that note changed hands, like he'd been watching through a telescope, like he'd known exactly what Father Thomas was doing. When had I started needing permission to drive my own car? When had I stopped trusting my own instincts? When had my husband's concern turned into surveillance? I checked my phone. 12:47 p.m. The note said midnight. 11 hours to wait. I couldn't go home. I couldn't go anywhere Desmond might find me. So I sat in my car between those shipping containers and waited while fog rolled in from the Pacific and the sun tracked across the sky above the gray blanket, invisible but present. By 6 p.m., my legs were cramping. By 9 p.m., my phone had died from Desmond's constant calls and texts. By 11 p.m., I was questioning everything: my sanity, my marriage, whether Father Thomas had been confused, or whether I was the one who'd lost my mind. But I'd made my choice, and for the first time in 3 years, I was going to see it through. At 11:45 p.m., I finally started the car and drove deeper into the port headlights still off, navigating by the yellow crane lights reflecting on black water. The bay stretched out before me, dark and vast, dotted with cargo ships riding at anchor. Ship horns echoed across the water, mournful and lonely. Pier 9 sat at the northernmost point of the port, past the active loading docks, where old shipping equipment rusted in salt air. I parked and stepped out into the smell of diesel and brine and creosote. The note had said the truth was inside. Inside what? Then I saw it. Under the skeletal frame of an ancient loading crane sitting on a concrete piling, a metal box about the size of a briefcase, marine-grade steel, with a small LED panel on the front, a fingerprint scanner. My breath caught. I knelt beside the box, my father's empire stretching out behind me in stacks of containers bearing the Mercer shipping logo. The LED glowed red in the darkness. I pressed my left thumb against the sensor. Nothing happened. 5 seconds, 10 seconds. Then the LED flashed green, the lock clicked, the box opened. Inside, a leather-bound diary in my father's handwriting. 3 USB drives. An envelope thick with papers that looked like medical documents. And a business card that read, Grant Reeves, private investigator, former FBI. My father had thought of me in his final days, not of the company, not of his legacy, but of me, and built this box to open only for his daughter's hand. I've been waiting for you, Miss Mercer. I spun around. A man stood at the edge of the crane's shadow, 52 or 53 years old, weathered face and gray hair, wearing jeans and a dark jacket. He had the steady bearing of someone who'd spent decades reading people staying calm, watching. Who are you? I demanded. How did you— Grant Reeves. He gestured to the business card in the box. Your father hired me 7 months ago. He told me if you found this box, it meant he was dead. He paused, his expression grave. And it meant you were in danger. I looked down at the open box in my hands. My father's diary. The first page visible in the yellow crane light. His handwriting shaky but determined, dated 7 months ago. If you're reading this, Leora, I'm already gone, and Desmond is not who he says he is. The world tilted. The fog rolled thicker. And Grant Reeves stood there watching me with the patient expression of someone who knew exactly what I was about to discover. My father's handwriting trembled across the first page of the diary, April 12th, 2025, and the first words I read were, I am being poisoned. Grant stood watch at the edge of the pier while I sat on a concrete piling under the yellow crane lights. The fingerprint box opened beside me, the leather-bound diary in my hands. The LED from the box cast everything in stark relief: my father's shaking script, the dates marching forward like a countdown, the clinical precision with which he documented his own murder. April 12th, 2025. I read aloud, my voice barely carrying over the sound of waves against ship hulls. Hair coming out in the shower again, 3rd time this week, joint pain worse, can't grip coffee cup without trembling. Grant didn't move. He'd heard this before. He'd been waiting for me to hear it. I turned the page. April 19th, April 26th, May 3rd. Each entry tracking symptoms with the methodical attention of a man who'd built a shipping empire through careful observation. Nausea, metallic taste in his morning coffee. Weakness so severe he could barely walk from bedroom to bathroom. May 15th. I read, and my voice cracked. The metallic taste is constant now. I know what this is. I've known for weeks arsenic poisoning, gradual careful design to look like heart failure. The fog rolled thicker across the bay, ship horns sounded in the distance, and I sat there reading my father's diary by the glow of a fingerprint box he'd prepared for this exact moment. Keep reading, Grant said quietly. It gets worse. May 22nd. I tested Leora's morning tonic, the one Desmond insists she take for her health. I took one pill from her bottle, same metallic taste, same bitter aftertaste that I've been tasting in my coffee for 2 months. She's being poisoned too, and she doesn't know. I stopped breathing. The tonic. The daily vitamin supplement Desmond had given me every morning for the past year, saying it would help with my stress, my anxiety, all the problems he said I was having. She trusts him. I read tears blurring the words. She takes the pills every morning without question. I see her health declining, the exhaustion, the brain fog, the hair loss she thinks is stress. It's arsenic. Low dose cumulative, destroying her slowly just like it's destroying me. My father had suffered in silence for 4 months, watching the poison destroy him cell by cell, choosing documentation over confrontation because he knew confrontation would get us both killed faster. Why didn't he tell me? I whispered. June 8th entry, Grant said. Read it. I turned pages with shaking hands until I found it. I can't tell Leora. Desmond watches her constantly, tracks her phone monitors, her calls, controls her schedule. If I tell her the truth, he'll know within hours. He'll accelerate the poisoning. We'll both be dead within weeks instead of months. My only option is to prepare evidence she can find after I'm gone, evidence he can't intercept or destroy. I looked up at Grant. He died to give me this. He hired me 7 months ago, Grant said. May 1st, 2025, showed me his medical tests, his symptoms, everything. Asked me to build a case against Desmond Cross that would survive his death. He knew he wouldn't live to see it through, but he knew you would. The final entry was dated August 14th, 2025. My father's last words written the day before he died. If you're reading this, Leora, I'm dead, and Desmond Cross is responsible. Everything you need is in this box. Trust Grant Reeves. Trust the evidence. Don't trust Desmond. Don't go home. And remember, I love you more than the company, more than the money, more than anything I ever built. You are my legacy, not the ships. You. I closed the diary and sat there in the salt air and yellow crane light, crying for the first time since he'd died. 3 days of numbness, and now it all came flooding back, not just grief, but rage, cold and focused and building like a tsunami. There's more, Grant said. He opened his laptop, balanced it on a shipping crate, and clicked on an audio file. This is from the second USB drive. Your father had it in his office safe. Hayes recorded it 5 years ago. Hayes, my brother's name hit me like a physical blow. The speakers crackled. Then my brother's voice filled the night air, young, urgent, alive in a way I hadn't heard in 5 years. October 8th, 2020. This is Hayes Mercer. If you're listening to this, something's wrong. I need to document this before I talk to Dad tonight. I grabbed the laptop, pulling it closer. I found documents in Dad's office safe. Legal papers showing someone named Hayes Mercer accessing the family trust. But the signature isn't mine. The handwriting isn't mine. I compared it to my own signatures, completely different. So I dug deeper. The sound of paper shuffling in the background. My brother breathing hard, nervous. The man using my name to access Dad's trust, he's not me. His real name is Desmond Cross. I found the fake birth certificate, fake passport, fake driver's license. He's been building this identity for months, maybe years, using my name, using my social security number, stealing from our family while pretending to be me. How many times had I sat across the dinner table from the man who murdered my brother, smiling, trusting, completely unaware? I'm telling Dad tonight, Hayes said, his voice tight with anger. We're going to the police tomorrow morning. I have copies of everything, the fake documents, the trust withdrawals, all of it. Desmond Cross is going to prison. A pause, my brother's breathing. If anything happens to me. The recording cut off. Just stopped. Mid-sentence. Mid-warning. Silence except for waves and distant ship horns. 3 days later, Grant said quietly. Hayes's yacht capsized in San Francisco Bay. Anchor rope failed. Police ruled it an accident. But your father never believed it. And when Desmond Cross showed up at the funeral 2 weeks later, introduced himself as a business consultant who wanted to help the grieving family your father knew. I stared at the laptop screen, the audio file frozen at 53 seconds. My brother's voice stopped forever at the moment he'd tried to save us all. Grant, I said, and my voice sounded nothing like my own. It sounded cold, controlled, lethal. What else is in these files? Grant spread 3 files across the container's metal surface under the yellow crane lights. 3 women, 3 insurance policies, 3 deaths spanning 12 years. Celeste Blake, he said, opening the first file. A photograph slid out: a woman with dark hair and a teacher's smile holding a coffee mug that read, "World's Best Educator." 43 years old elementary school teacher in Miami. Married Desmond Cross in January 2012. Reported missing November 2013 after neighbors heard arguing. Police searched for 6 weeks. Body never found. I stared at the woman's face. She looked happy in the photo. Trusting. Desmond filed the life insurance claim 4 months later. Grant continued. $800,000. Police couldn't prove foul play without a body, so the insurance company paid out. Case went cold. Desmond Cross disappeared from Miami 2 weeks after collecting the money. "Where's her body?" I whispered. "That's the question your father asked me 7 months ago." Grant opened the second file. My brother's face looked back at me from his driver's license photo. Hayes Mercer, 30 years old. October 2020, his yacht capsized in San Francisco Bay. Anchor rope failed during a storm. Coast Guard recovered his body 3 days later. Ruled accidental death. I couldn't breathe. Desmond killed Hayes for his identity. Your brother discovered the fraud 3 days before he died. He was going to tell Leonard that night. Instead, his yacht's anchor rope, which had been inspected and certified seaworthy 2 weeks earlier, mysteriously failed in 8-foot swells. Grant's voice stayed flat professional, but his eyes were hard. Desmond showed up at the funeral 2 weeks later, introduced himself as a business consultant who wanted to help the grieving family. He had new identity documents by then. New background, new references, new everything. The third file showed my father's face. I couldn't look at it. "Leonard Mercer," Grant said quietly. 68 years old. Systematic arsenic poisoning administered over 6 months. Died August 2025, 2 weeks ago. Medical examiner ruled it heart failure because arsenic poisoning mimics cardiac arrest when administered in low doses over time. Your father knew what was happening, documented it for 4 months, and prepared this evidence box for you to find. How had I lived with this man for 3 years, shared his bed, trusted his touch, and never once suspected I was sleeping next to a serial killer? Same pattern every time, Grant said. Marry someone with assets. Establish trust through charm and attention. Administer low-dose arsenic to mimic natural illness. Wait. Collect insurance or inheritance. Disappear before anyone asks questions. He's been perfecting this method for 12 years. How many? My voice didn't sound like mine. How many has he killed? That we know of 3. Celeste Blake, Hayes Mercer, Leonard Mercer. Grant looked at me with the steady gaze of someone delivering a death sentence. You're not his wife, Leora. You're his 4th victim. And the target isn't just insurance this time. It's Mercer Shipping. $50 million accessed by impersonating Hayes and marrying the sole remaining heir. The fog rolled across the bay. Ship horns echoed. And I stood there at Pier 9, understanding that I'd been marked for death the moment Desmond had appeared at my brother's funeral. My father hired you 7 months ago, I said. Did he know all of this? He suspected. The moment Desmond showed up claiming to be a business consultant, Leonard started investigating. Found the pattern, found Celeste Blake's disappearance, found the insurance payout. That's when he hired me. Grant closed the files. He told me if anything happened to him, I should wait for you to find the box. Let you discover the truth yourself with evidence you could trust. Because he knew Desmond would try to convince you that you were imagining things, that you were mentally unstable, that grief was making you paranoid. My father had known, had prepared, had protected me even while dying. What do? I asked. Grant handed me a phone. Go home. Act normal. Don't let Desmond know you've discovered anything. Document everything he does. We need more evidence before we go to the police right now. We have suspicions and circumstantial evidence. We need proof. At 6 a.m., I pulled into the driveway of the Pacific Heights mansion. Desmond's car sat in the garage. The house looked exactly as I'd left it 24 hours ago. But I walked through the front door as a different person than the one who'd driven away from my father's funeral. The bathroom still smelled like Desmond's cologne and my vanilla body wash. Normal, familiar, deadly. I opened the medicine cabinet with hands that didn't shake. The vitamin bottle sat on the second shelf where it always did. The label read, Daily Women's Health Complex, recommended by Dr. Morrison for stress and anxiety. I opened the bottle and shook one pill into my palm. Small, white, innocuous. The same pill I'd taken every morning for a year without question. I placed it on my tongue. The metallic taste hit instantly. Bitter copper underneath the coating, exactly like my father had described in his diary. Not vitamins, not medicine. Poison. The same arsenic that had destroyed my father's body, cell by cell, while Desmond watched and waited. The metallic taste on my tongue wasn't just poison, it was proof evidence power. And for the first time since my father's funeral, I felt something other than grief. I felt dangerous. I spat the pill into a tissue and wrapped it carefully. My first piece of evidence gathered with my own hands. Good morning, sweetheart. I turned. Desmond stood in the bathroom doorway in his pajama pants, hair perfect even after sleep, that smile on his face. The same smile he'd worn at my father's funeral. The same smile he'd probably worn while watching Celeste Blake disappear, while sabotaging Hayes's yacht, while serving my father poisoned coffee for 6 months. Did you take your vitamin? He asked, his voice full of concern. Full of love, full of lies. I looked him in the eyes and smiled back. Yes, honey, like every day. The lie came easily, naturally, like I'd been practicing for years. Desmond kissed my forehead, completely satisfied, completely unaware. Good girl, I worry about you, especially with all this stress from your father's death. I know, I said, you're always taking care of me. He smiled and walked toward the shower. I stood there holding the tissue-wrapped pill in my palm, my phone with Grant's number programmed into it sitting on the counter. The woman in the mirror looked different than she had 24 hours ago. Harder, colder, ready. The sound came from my father's office, a door I hadn't opened since the funeral, and it was the unmistakable click, click, click of someone taking photographs. I stood in the second-floor hallway of the mansion, the tissue-wrapped pill still in my pocket from this morning's deception, listening to the steady rhythm of a camera shutter through the mahogany door. Desmond had left for the office an hour ago. The house should have been empty except for me. Click, click, click. I turned the brass doorknob slowly. The office smelled like my father, leather, and pipe tobacco, and the sea air that always clung to his shipping manifests. But the woman standing at his desk didn't belong there. Odette, the new maid Desmond had hired, stood with her back to me, phone raised, photographing documents spread across the mahogany surface. She wore the gray uniform Desmond had ordered, her dark hair pulled back in a neat bun. 35 years old, calm and efficient, she'd appeared in our house 1 week ago with a resume Desmond said was impeccable. She didn't startle when the door opened. She simply looked up, phone still in hand, and met my eyes with an assessment that had nothing to do with a servant caught where she shouldn't be. "What are you doing in here?" I asked. Odette lowered her phone but didn't hide it. "Organizing papers, Mrs. Cross. I was photographing documents to create a filing system." Her voice was steady, rehearsed like she'd prepared this answer in advance. "When did my husband hire you?" "Last week, Mrs. Cross. Wednesday, the day after your father's funeral." She gestured to the papers on the desk: shipping contracts, financial statements, insurance documents. "Mr. Cross said you needed support during this difficult time. He asked me to help organize your father's estate papers. Last week, the day after the funeral. The day after I'd stood at my father's casket, unable to cry. Desmond had planted this woman in my house within 24 hours of Leonard's burial. "I don't remember meeting you," I said. Odette's expression stayed neutral. "You were resting when I arrived. Mr. Cross showed me the house and explained my duties." She set her phone on the desk screen down. "I apologize if I overstepped. I was only trying to be helpful." But her eyes never stopped assessing me, not with a servant's deference or an employee's nervousness. She was evaluating me like Grant had evaluated the victim files at Pier 9, cold, analytical, measuring threat levels. "These are private business documents," I said, walking closer to the desk. Why would you photograph them? Mr. Cross requested digital copies for the estate lawyers. He said paper files were inefficient and might be lost during probate. Odette's hands rested calmly at her sides. No fidgeting. No guilty tells. I've been photographing and uploading everything to the cloud storage he provided. The answer was technically plausible. Desmond was obsessive about digital records, about control, about knowing where every document existed. But something in Odette's tone felt wrong, too smooth, too prepared. In a house where my husband was poisoning me and my father had died documenting evidence, who could I trust, and how would I even know? What company did you work for before this? I asked. Prestige Domestic Services. They placed me with several families in the Marina District over the past 3 years. My references are in the folder Mr. Cross kept. I can get them for you if you'd like. I looked at the documents spread across my father's desk. Shipping manifests from 2020, the year Hayes died. Insurance policies, trust documents. Everything Leonard had been gathering before Desmond killed him. Leave this office, I said quietly. Don't come back in here without asking me first. Odette nodded. Of course, Mrs. Cross. My apologies. She picked up her phone, slipped it into her apron pocket, and walked past me toward the door. No argument. No explanation. No fear. She stepped into the hallway, closing the door behind her with a soft click. I stood there for 30 seconds listening to her footsteps recede down the hallway toward the servants' stairs. Then I heard it again. Click, click, click. I opened the door. Odette had returned to the office, must have circled back the moment I'd stopped listening, and stood at the desk photographing the same documents, phone raised, completely unconcerned. She looked up when the door opened. No surprise, no guilt, just that same calm assessment. I thought I told you to leave, I said. You did, Mrs. Cross. Odette took another photograph. But Mr. Cross asked me to complete this work today. I have 17 more files to photograph before he returns home. She wasn't asking permission. She wasn't apologizing. She was informing me that Desmond's orders superseded mine in my own father's office. The sound of those camera clicks wasn't just surveillance. It was a message someone else was watching, gathering information, and I had no idea whose side they were on. Get out, I said. Now. Odette saved the photo to her phone, slipped it back into her pocket, and walked past me again. This time I followed her down the hallway, watching as she descended the servants' stairs toward the kitchen. I waited at the top of the stairwell for 5 minutes. Silence. No footsteps returning. No camera clicks. But when I walked back past my father's office, I heard it. Click, click, click. She'd come back up a different stairwell. She was in there right now, photographing documents, completely unafraid of consequences. Not nervous, not frightened, methodical. I stood in the hallway listening to the steady rhythm of her camera. Most people caught doing something wrong would stop, would hide, would show fear. But Odette kept photographing like I was the intruder, like she had more right to those documents than I did. This wasn't a spy who'd been intimidated into helping Desmond. This was someone with her own agenda, her own reasons, her own investigation. Someone who didn't care if I caught her because she wasn't afraid of me, or maybe because she was more afraid of someone else. I pulled out my phone and texted Grant. The maid Desmond hired is photographing all of Dad's business documents. Says he told her to. But she's not scared of being caught. Who is she? The reply came 30 seconds later, checking her background now. Don't confront her until I know more. If she's working for Desmond, we need to know what she's looking for. If she's not, we need to know who sent her. I stood outside my father's office, listening to Odette's camera clicking steadily through the door. 2 mysteries now. My husband, the serial killer, and a maid who photographed documents like she was building her own case. I gave the clinic receptionist a fake name, Sarah Mitchell, and filled out forms listing an address I'd never lived at, because if Desmond tracked me here, he'd know I'd discovered the poison. The private medical clinic sat 40 minutes south of San Francisco, in a nondescript office park that Grant had chosen specifically for its distance from Desmond's network of doctors. I'd left the mansion at 8:30 a.m. while Desmond was in the shower, telling him I needed to drive to clear my head. He'd kissed my forehead and told me to be careful, his hand lingering on my shoulder, in that proprietary way that now made my skin crawl. I'd driven south with one hand on the wheel and the other clutching the tissue-wrapped pill from yesterday's bathroom deception. Physical evidence, but I needed more. Name for the file, the receptionist asked. She was young, maybe 25, with bright pink nails and a bored expression. Sarah Mitchell, Mitchell. Address. I recited the fake address I'd memorized from a street in Oakland I'd found on a map. Insurance information, none paying cash. Emergency contact blank. I was a ghost walking into this clinic, and I needed to walk out the same way. The waiting room smelled like antiseptic and old magazines. I sat on a vinyl chair that stuck to my skin, hands shaking despite my attempts to appear calm. Around me, other patients waited, an older man coughing into his elbow, a mother with a feverish child, a teenager scrolling through his phone. Normal people with normal medical problems. I was here to confirm my husband had been poisoning me for 6 months. Sarah Mitchell, a phlebotomist, led me to a small room with an examination table covered in crinkly paper. She tied a rubber tourniquet around my arm, tapped the vein in the crook of my elbow, and slid the needle in with practiced efficiency. I watched my blood fill 3 glass vials, dark red, almost purple, carrying proof of attempted murder in every cell. Comprehensive toxicology screening, she said, labeling the vials. Results in about 90 minutes. Dr. Lennox will review them with you. 3 vials of blood. 3 vials of evidence. I watched her carry them down the hallway toward the lab, and for the first time in 3 days I felt something close to hope. 93 minutes later, Dr. Patricia Lennox called me into her office. She was 48 with gray-streaked hair and the grim expression of someone who'd seen poisoning cases before and knew exactly what they meant. 20 years of toxicology experience, Grant had said when he'd arranged this appointment. Independent practice, no connection to Desmond's medical network. She set a printout on the desk between us, numbers and chemical compounds I didn't understand, but one line was highlighted in yellow. Ms. Mitchell, she said and paused. Is that your real name? Does it matter? Not for medical treatment, but it might matter for what comes next. She tapped the highlighted line. Your arsenic level is 3.5 parts per million. Normal levels are 0.02. You have 175 times the safe threshold in your bloodstream. The room tilted slightly. I'd known. I'd tasted the metallic poison on my tongue yesterday morning. But hearing it quantified 175 times normal made it real in a way that tasting hadn't. How long would it take to accumulate that much, I asked. Dr. Lennox pulled up a chart on her computer. 4 to 6 months of consistent daily exposure, low doses designed to avoid acute symptoms but high enough to cause gradual system failure. She looked at me over her reading glasses. This isn't accidental contamination. This is systematic poisoning. What are the symptoms? Hair loss, nausea, joint pain, fatigue, cognitive fog, metallic taste in the mouth. As levels rise, kidney damage, liver failure, neurological deterioration, cardiac arrest. I'd become evidence, not just a victim gathering proof, but proof itself. My blood and bones and failing organs testifying to crimes no one else could see. Every symptom matched. The hair coming out in the shower that I'd blamed on stress, the nausea I'd attributed to grief over my father, the joint pain I'd thought came from sleepless nights, the exhaustion that had made me stop questioning Desmond's constant suggestions that I needed rest, needed help, needed him. You mentioned this was for a legal case, Dr. Lennox said carefully. I need to know, are you still being exposed? Yes. Then we need to start chelation therapy immediately. Every day you wait risks permanent damage. At these levels, you're looking at kidney failure, liver damage, neurological problems that might not reverse even with treatment. She pulled out a prescription pad. I can start you on dimercaprol injections today. We'll need to... No. Dr. Lennox stopped writing. Excuse me. I can't. Not yet. I need this evidence to stay in my body a while longer. She set down her pen. Ms. Mitchell, or whatever your real name is, chelation therapy will remove the arsenic from your system. If you're building a legal case, I can document current levels, but continuing exposure is necessary, I said. My voice sounded cold even to me, controlled, strategic. The person poisoning me needs to believe it's working. If my symptoms suddenly improve, if the arsenic levels drop, he'll know I discovered it, and then he'll change his method. What price would I pay for justice? My health, my safety, perhaps my life? And would it be enough to destroy the man who'd murdered my father and brother? You could die, Dr. Lennox said flatly. At these levels, with continued exposure, you're looking at organ failure within months, maybe weeks if the doses increase. Is any case worth that? I thought of my father's diary. 4 months of documentation while poison destroyed him. 4 months of silence and suffering because confrontation would have killed us both faster. He'd sacrificed his life to give me this evidence. I could sacrifice my health to finish what he started. Print 3 copies of these results, I said. Seal them in medical envelopes, and yes, this case is worth it. Dr. Lennox studied me for a long moment. Then she nodded and turned to her printer. You're going to get him, aren't you, whoever's doing this to you? Yes. Good. She handed me 3 sealed envelopes marked confidential, patient copy. But if you die before you can testify, he wins. Remember that. I took the envelopes. 3.5 parts per million arsenic, 1 copy for Grant, 1 for a safe deposit box Desmond couldn't access, 1 hidden in my car. And tomorrow morning, I would swallow another poison pill and watch my husband smile while the evidence in my bloodstream climbed higher. Desmond's office door was unlocked for the first time in 3 years, and I had exactly 90 minutes before his meeting downtown ended. I'd hidden the blood work results 1 copy in my car, 1 with Grant, 1 in a safe deposit box Desmond didn't know existed. Now I needed the second piece proof that Desmond Cross had stolen my brother's identity. The door handle turned easily. No click, no resistance. Either Desmond had grown careless or this was bait. The office smelled like leather and expensive cologne. His desk sat against the window, mahogany and pristine, with a closed laptop and neat folders. Framed photographs of shipping vessels lined the walls. Everything looked professional, normal, too normal. I started with the desk drawers, business cards, pens organized by color, appointment books, financial reports. The file cabinets held shipping manifests, insurance documents, tax returns, all legitimate, all perfectly organized, all useless. Hayes said he found fake documents, I muttered. They have to be here. I'd searched the desk, the cabinets, the bookshelves. Nothing. Just an office belonging to a businessman who happened to be poisoning his wife. Then I saw it. The large, ornate mirror on the wall, its gilded frame baroque and excessive in a room otherwise decorated with clean lines. And it sat slightly crooked, the left edge, not flush against the plaster. I ran my fingers along the frame's edge, a tiny gap between frame and wall. I pulled. The mirror swung open on hidden hinges. Behind it, a narrow closet lined with shelves. A metal lockbox sat on top. Below it, stacks of file folders and photographs bound with rubber bands. I pulled down the first stack of photos. The rubber bands snapped. Photos spilled across the desk. The top photo stopped my breath. Hayes. My brother at 28 in a tuxedo arm around a woman in green, both laughing. I flipped it over. Hayes Mercer Engagement Party, April 2019, San Francisco Yacht Club. I held my brother's engagement photo in trembling hands, seeing Hayes's face, truly his face for the first time in 5 years, and understood that the man I'd been sleeping beside wasn't just a killer, but a ghost wearing my brother's skin. Because this face looked nothing like the man I'd married. Hayes had been broader through the shoulders with a crooked nose from a childhood surfing accident and a dimple in his left cheek. The man calling himself Desmond Cross had none of those features. Different bone structure, different jawline, different everything. I grabbed the lockbox. Not locked, just latched, inside documents in plastic sleeves. A U.S. passport. I opened it with shaking fingers. Name Hayes Mercer. Date of birth August 14th, 1990. Place of birth San Francisco, California. Photo Desmond Cross's face. The passport had stamps from business trips London, Tokyo, Singapore, all dated after October 2020. After Hayes died. After his yacht capsized and his body was recovered from the bay. Below the passport, a birth certificate with Hayes's name and Desmond's information. A social security card, a driver's license. Complete identity replacement, every document perfectly forged to erase my brother and replace him with Desmond's face. At the bottom, a faded photo. Miami, 2007, written on the back. 2 men in their late 20s on a beach, arms around each other's shoulders. Desmond younger but unmistakable. The other man I didn't know. How long had Desmond planned this? How many months or years had he studied? Hayes learned his mannerisms, prepared to step into his identity the moment my brother died. A car engine cut through my thoughts. I ran to the window, Desmond's Tesla pulling into the driveway. The clock showed 2:50 p.m. 70 minutes. The meeting should have run until 3:30. 30 seconds, maybe less. I grabbed the passport and Miami photo, shoved them in my pocket, threw the other documents back in the lockbox, pushed it onto the shelf, swung the mirror door closed. It clicked shut as I heard the front door open downstairs. "Honey, I'm home early. Meeting got canceled. Where are you?" I stood frozen, Hayes's engagement photo still on the desk, the mirror maybe not quite flush, my heart hammering. "Leora." I grabbed the photo, shoved it in my pocket, looked around wildly. The desk looked untouched. File cabinets closed. The mirror, God, was it straight. Footsteps in the hallway, 20 feet away, 15. I opened the office door and stepped out, pulling it closed just as Desmond reached the top of the stairs. He stopped, looked at me, looked at the closed office door, back at me. "What were you doing in there?" His voice was calm, curious, but his eyes were cold, measuring my reaction. I held his gaze and lied. "Looking for the estate lawyer's business card. I think we need to start probate on father's will." Desmond's hand stayed on his briefcase handle. "Did you find it?" "No." He smiled. That perfect smile I'd once thought meant love. "That's okay. I have his number saved. Why don't you go rest, darling? You look exhausted." He walked past me into the office. I stood in the hallway, Hayes's fake passport burning in my pocket, listening to him set down his briefcase, hearing his chair creak as he sat at his desk. Then silence. Was he checking the mirror? Opening the lockbox? Counting documents to see if anything was missing? I forced myself to walk down the hallway toward our bedroom, each step measured and calm, even though my hands were shaking and my heart was trying to break through my ribs. Inside our bedroom, I closed the door and pulled out the passport. Hayes Mercer's name, Desmond Cross's photo, proof that my husband had murdered my brother and stolen his entire existence to marry me and take $50 million. My phone buzzed. "Text from Grant, got your blood work copy. When can you meet? Need to discuss next steps." I typed back with trembling fingers. "Found the fake passport. He came home early and almost caught me. Can you meet tonight?" Grant's reply came instantly. "Pier 9. Midnight. Bring everything you found. And Leora, be careful. If he knows you're looking, he'll accelerate his timeline." I looked at the passport in my hand, then at the bedroom door, imagining Desmond on the other side, checking his hidden compartment right now, realizing documents were missing, calculating whether his wife had finally discovered the truth. If he caught me now with evidence of his identity theft in my pocket, would I become victim number 5? I shoved the fake passport and Hayes's engagement photo into my purse, slammed the mirror door shut, and walked out of Desmond's office 15 seconds before his footsteps hit the stairs. My hands were still shaking when Desmond reached the second floor. I stood in the hallway, my purse heavy with stolen evidence. "What are you doing up here?" he asked. "Headache. I was looking for aspirin in the bathroom." Desmond studied my face. "You look pale. Are you feeling all right?" "Just tired." I touched my temple. "The headache's been there all day." He stepped closer. His hand came up to my forehead, checking for fever. The touch that used to feel like care now felt like surveillance. "Maybe you should rest," he said. "I'll bring you some tea. Tea with arsenic, probably." "Thank you," I said, and walked past him toward our bedroom. Behind me, his office door opened. Any second he might check the mirror open, the lockbox, count the documents. But I had what I needed. That evening, Grant and I sat in Dr. Sherman Hunt's private office after hours. Our family physician for 2 decades, 58 years old with gray hair and tired eyes, looked at the document Grant placed before him. A life insurance policy, $1.5 million, beneficiary Desmond Cross, insured party Dr. Sherman Hunt. "Recognize this Dr. Hunt?" Grant asked. Hunt's face drained of color. His hands trembled as he picked up the policy dated 3 months ago, right after he'd deleted Leonard's arsenic results. "He bought life insurance on me," Hunt whispered. "God, I'm next, aren't I?" I pulled out my blood work. 3.5 parts per million arsenic. You diagnosed me with anxiety, but you knew what it was. Hunt couldn't meet my eyes. "Desmond paid me $200,000 to delete your father's toxicology results, to diagnose heart failure instead of poisoning." I thought I didn't know he was planning to kill you too, Grant finished. Celeste Blake's doctor died in a car accident 6 months after her disappearance. Brake failure. Hunt's face went gray. Dr. Hunt wasn't just a villain anymore. He was another of Desmond's victims. Just one who'd survived long enough to realize the man who bought his silence had also bought his death. Give us my father's real medical records, I said. Every test result you destroyed, now. Hunt walked to a locked file cabinet and pulled out a manila folder. Leonard Mercer, Complete Toxicology Panel from May 2025, 12.4 parts per million arsenic. Levels consistent with systematic poisoning over 4 to 6 months. I certified cause of death as cardiac arrest. Desmond paid half up front, half after cremation. Grant photographed every page, proof that Hunt had helped murder my father, proof that would send both of them to prison. You'll testify, Grant said. Hunt nodded. I'll testify to everything. Just please keep me alive long enough to do it. The next morning, we walked into the operations office at Pier 9. Bryce Hartley, 45, the Pier's operations manager for 8 years, looked up from his computer. His expression shifted to alarm when he saw Grant's credentials. Mr. Hartley, Grant said, placing another life insurance policy on the desk. Recognize this. Bryce picked it up. $2 million. Beneficiary Desmond Cross. Insured party Bryce Hartley. 2 million, Bryce said, voice barely audible. Jesus, he's going to kill me like he killed Jennifer's accomplice. Jennifer, I asked. Grant pulled out a file. Jennifer Morrison helped Desmond with the Celeste Blake disappearance in Miami. Died in a house fire 8 months after collecting her payment. Bryce set down the policy with shaking hands. I kept insurance, my own insurance. He opened his desk safe and pulled out a small digital recorder. October 10th, 2020, 3 days before Hayes Mercer's yacht went down. Desmond called me on a burner phone, but I recorded everything. He pressed play. Static. Then Desmond's voice unmistakable. Bryce, I need work done on the Hayes Mercer yacht, the Meridian Slip 47. What kind of work? Bryce's voice younger, nervous. Cut the mooring rope on the starboard side. Make it look like wear and tear. The wind from the bay will do the rest when he takes her out in the next storm. That's murder. That's $80,000 cash, half now, half when it's done. Are you interested or not? A pause. Then yeah, I'm interested. The recording continued. 47 seconds total. Desmond's voice laying out the exact plan, cut the rope 70% through, wait for Hayes to take the yacht out, let the weather do the work. $80,000 for fratricide. How many people had Desmond killed or ordered killed? 5, 6, 7. And how many more had he planned to eliminate before someone finally stopped him? Grant saved the audio file to 3 separate drives while I sat frozen. My brother's voice would have been on that yacht 3 days after this call. And then he was dead drowned when his mooring failed and the boat drifted into rocks. Not an accident. Murder. Ordered by the man I'd married. Executed by the man sitting across from me. You'll testify too, Grant said to Bryce. Bryce nodded. I'll testify. Just keep me breathing long enough to do it. I walked out of that office with the audio file backed up to the cloud and the weight of my brother's murder pressing down like physical force. Desmond's voice on that recording, cold, businesslike, arranging death like a shipping contract, was the voice that had told me he loved me last night. Grant's car sat in this parking lot. Inside Leonard's real medical records showing 12.4 parts per million arsenic. The fake passport with Hayes' stolen identity. Audio proof of murder for $80,000. 3 victims, 3 pieces of evidence, 3 witnesses ready to testify. We had the doctor, we had the port manager, we had physical proof. Bryce's recording played through Grant's laptop speakers one more time. Desmond's voice, cold and businesslike, ordering my brother's murder for $80,000, like he was negotiating a shipping contract. 47 seconds. Enough to send him to prison for life. But Odette was still photographing documents in my father's office, and I needed to know whose side she was really on. I found Odette in the basement at 11 p.m., bathed in laptop glow, staring at a photograph of a woman who could have been her twin if her twin had been dead for 13 years. Celeste Blake's obituary photo stared back from the screen. The basement door had been open when I'd walked past on my way to bed. Just a crack, but enough to see the blue light flickering below. Enough to hear the soft click of camera shutters. Odette photographing documents again. But this time I had evidence of my own Dr. Hunt's medical records. Bryce's audio recording the fake passport with my brother's name and Desmond's face. This time I wasn't letting her leave without answers. I descended the concrete steps slowly, each footfall deliberate. She heard me coming, but didn't stop working. File folders spread across the floor around her. Desmond's locked filing cabinet stood open, picked with tools that lay beside her laptop. "That's Celeste Blake," I said. Odette's hand stilled on the keyboard. "Yes. The woman Desmond murdered in Miami 12 years ago. The woman whose body was never found. 13 years." Odette turned to face me. Her eyes were dry, but her voice held 13 years of grief. "Not 12. 13 years I've been searching for what happened to my sister." The word hit me like a physical blow. Sister. I'm Odette Blake. I changed my surname to Rhodes 3 years ago. Took 8 months of training to become a domestic worker good enough to pass Desmond's background checks. Infiltrated your household last week with one purpose: to find proof my sister didn't commit suicide. And to kill the man who murdered her. She said it calmly, matter-of-factly, like she was describing meal preparation. "You're not Desmond's spy," I said. "You're here for revenge." "I'm here for justice. There's a difference." Odette gestured to the laptop screen. Celeste Blake, age 43, elementary school teacher, reported missing November 2013. Police found a suicide note forged. I proved that 2 years ago by comparing it to her real handwriting. Her body was never recovered, and Desmond Cross collected $800,000 in life insurance 6 months later. "I know," I said. "Grant showed me the files." Odette's expression sharpened. "Grant Reeves, the investigator your father hired. You've been working with him for 5 days, since I found my father's evidence box at Pier 9. I pulled out my phone and showed her the photo of Dr. Hunt's records. My father had 12.4 parts per million arsenic in his blood. I have 3.5. Desmond's been poisoning both of us. Odette's voice cracked when she spoke. The funeral director said Celeste looked peaceful when they finally found her body 3 years after she disappeared. But I saw the autopsy photos when I finally bribed the right clerk. There was nothing peaceful about arsenic poisoning. Her organs were... She stopped, breathed. Desmond paid the medical examiner to suppress the toxicology results, paid him to rule it suicide, paid him to cremate the body before anyone could ask questions. 2 women, 2 sisters, both destroyed by the same man using the same poison. "Why didn't you go to the police?" I asked. "With what autopsy photos I obtained illegally. A forged suicide note I couldn't prove was forged without the original handwriting samples Desmond destroyed. The police in Miami closed the case. The insurance company paid out. Everyone moved on except me." Odette turned back to the filing cabinet. "So I trained. I waited. I researched every identity Desmond Cross had used. And when I discovered he'd married into the Mercer family, I knew this was my chance." "A chance to do what?" Odette reached into her apron pocket and pulled out a small glass vial. Clear liquid, maybe 2 ounces. Brodifacoum, rat poison, anticoagulant. 3 drops in his evening whiskey, and Desmond bleeds internally for 3 to 5 days before anyone understands why. By the time they run the right tests, I'll be gone. The basement smelled like old paper and furniture polish, but the vial in my palm when she handed it to me carried the faint chemical tang of anticoagulant death. 3 drops. That's all Odette said it would take. 3 drops in aged whiskey, and Desmond would bleed internally for days before anyone understood why. "He has his whiskey at 11:30, Odette continued. "Like clockwork. I was going to do it tonight, add the poison to the decanter before he came downstairs. He'd pour his glass, drink it, go to bed. And by Friday, he'd be dead." "No," I said. Odette's eyes went hard. "You don't get to tell me no. He killed my sister. He deserves prison." I pulled out my phone and showed her everything. The fake passport, the audio recording of Desmond ordering Hayes's murder, Dr. Hunt's confession. Death is too easy. He gets to escape. But prison supermax 23 hours a day in a concrete cell for the rest of his life. That's real suffering. That's justice. Odette stared at the evidence on my screen. "You have all this medical records proving the poisoning, audio proof of murder for hire, identity theft documents. 2 accomplices ready to testify. And you. I gestured to the files spread across the floor. What have you found? Financial records showing the embezzlement, insurance documents, the marriage certificate to Celeste with his real signature before he learned to forge. Everything I need to prove who he really is. Then we combine our evidence, I said. We build a case that destroys him legally. We put him in prison where he can't hurt anyone else, where he'll suffer for decades instead of bleeding out peacefully in 3 days. Odette looked at the vial in my hand, then at the laptop screen showing her sister's face, then at me. Legal justice, she said slowly. You really think it's enough? I think it's the only way we both survive. If you poison him and disappear, you spend the rest of your life running. If we do this right, we both get to watch him convicted. Odette was silent for a long moment. Then she nodded. Okay. Legal justice. Give me the vial back. I need to dispose of it safely before. Footsteps on the basement stairs. Slow, deliberate. The distinctive rhythm I'd learned to recognize in 3 years of marriage. Desmond, Odette and I froze. The filing cabinet stood open behind us. 24 incriminating documents spread across the concrete floor in the harsh LED light. Her laptop displayed Celeste's obituary photo. My phone showed the fake passport. The footsteps continued descending. He wasn't supposed to come down here until midnight. But there he was, 15 seconds from the bottom step, and we had evidence of our investigation scattered across the floor like an accusation. The lie came so easily I almost believed it myself. I'd asked Odette to find Father's old shipping manifests, and we'd simply lost track of time in the basement chaos. I swept the documents into a pile while Odette closed the filing cabinet. Desmond reached the bottom step just as I turned to face him. Funny time to be doing estate research, Lyora, he said. I couldn't sleep. The shipping contracts from 2019 should prove Father's mental state was fine when he updated his will. The lawyers need documentation. Desmond looked at Odette. She stood with her hands folded, the perfect servant. My apologies, Mr. Cross, Odette said. I should have tidied as we went. Mrs. Cross asked for my assistance. Desmond studied us both. The silence stretched. I forced myself to meet his eyes. I have a dinner meeting, he said finally. Harbor Commission. I'll be back by midnight. Have a good evening, I said. He climbed the stairs. We waited until we heard the front door close. Then Odette sat on the concrete floor shaking. He knew something was wrong, she whispered. But he left, I said. And tomorrow we make this house into the trap that catches him. 24 hours later, Grant arrived with 2 technicians while Desmond attended his Harbor Commission dinner. 3.5 hours to work. The technicians moved through the mansion like ghosts, installing tiny cameras no bigger than shirt buttons. Master bedroom, Grant directed. Study, basement, kitchen, main entryway, garage, and the master bathroom aimed at the floor panel where the safe is. You're the homeowner, Grant said, handing me paperwork. Everything we're installing is legal so long as you authorize it. I signed 7 consent forms. Authorization to install surveillance in my own home, my father's home. He turned this house into my prison, I said. Now it's his trap. Odette watched from the doorway. The bathroom camera, will it catch him accessing the floor safe? Grant adjusted the angle on his laptop. Perfectly. And it's all uploading to encrypted cloud storage. Even if he discovers the cameras, will have everything. The cameras were tiny black eyes no bigger than shirt buttons, but they saw everything Desmond had hidden for 3 years. At 10:45 p.m., Grant spread legal documents across the desk. California is a 2-party consent state for recording, he explained. But there's an exception, single-party consent in your own home. You live here. You can record anywhere except where guests have reasonable privacy expectations. What about the bathroom? I asked. Aimed at the floor panel, not the facilities. Legally defensible. And Desmond isn't a guest, he's a resident. You have full authority. I'd spent 6 years in this house feeling watched, controlled, trapped. Now the house was watching him. The next morning at 9:20 a.m., Odette searched the master bathroom while Desmond was at his office. She pried up the loose tile beneath the vanity. Inside a U.S. passport, older, worn with stamps from 3 cities, she whispered into her phone, recording for Grant. Found his real passport. Thomas Ridley, born 1982. 3 cities, 3 victims. The stamps told the story. Miami, Florida, March 2008. 3 weeks before Celeste Blake married Desmond Cross. Sacramento, California, January 2013. 1 month before Leonard's arsenic symptoms began. San Francisco, California, August 2019. 1 week before Leonard changed his will. The Miami stamp is 3 weeks before my sister married him, Odette said. He was never Desmond Cross. He was always Thomas Ridley, moving from city to city, victim to victim. Below the passport banking documents from the Cayman Islands, account statements showing 13 years of deposits, insurance payouts, embezzled funds, inheritance transfers. Total $4,200,000, Odette called Grant. $4.2 million. That's not running money, that's disappearing money. Check the recent transactions, Grant said. She scrolled through. $380,000. Transferred 2 weeks ago, right after Lyora started asking questions. We're out of time. An hour later, Grant sat in the study with us, the passport and bank statements spread across the desk. Thomas Ridley disappeared from Miami in 2013, Grant said. Collected Celeste's insurance and vanished. Resurfaced in Sacramento under a new identity. Disappeared again in 2020 after Hayes's death. Each time he liquidates and starts fresh. How long do we have? I asked. Grant pulled up a document. He purchased a one-way ticket to Grand Cayman yesterday. Departure date 5 days from now. 5 days. Less than a week before Thomas Ridley vanished forever, with over $4 million, leaving 3 dead victims and me with enough arsenic to kill me within months. The cameras are live, Grant said. But we need him to confess. We need him to say something on tape that proves he murdered Leonard Hayes and Celeste. Without that confession, we have circumstantial evidence and accomplice testimony. Good, but not ironclad. He's already moving money, Odette said. A week, maybe less? Grant spread the passport and bank statements across the study desk, Thomas Ridley's entire escape plan in 14 pages. The cameras were live, feeding encrypted footage to servers Desmond would never find. But we needed him to confess on tape before he ran, and according to the most recent wire transfer, he'd just purchased a one-way ticket to Grand Cayman. Departure date 5 days from now. So we provoke him, I said. We make him think he's won, and we record every word when he tells us how he did it. Grant nodded. You'll need to be careful. If he realizes you know, he might accelerate his timeline. Or worse, he might decide you're too dangerous to leave alive. I've been taking his poison for 6 months, I said. I'm already dangerous to leave alive. The difference is now I know it. Odette pulled out her phone, showing the camera feeds from all 7 locations in the mansion. Live footage of empty rooms waiting. When? She asked. Tomorrow night, I said. I'll stage a breakdown. Tell him I can't handle the grief, that I need him, that I'm falling apart. Make him comfortable. Make him think I'm weak. And then I'll ask him questions about my father, my brother, our marriage. Let him talk. Let him brag. And the cameras will catch everything, Grant said. I looked at the screen showing my bedroom, the study, the basement where we'd almost been caught. The mansion that had been my prison was now my weapon. 5 days, I said. That's all the time he has left as a free man. Desmond slid the court documents across the breakfast table like he was serving me eggs. A competency petition claiming I suffered from severe paranoid delusions, filed yesterday, hearing scheduled in 72 hours. The cameras Grant installed were live, watching, recording, but Desmond had struck first. What is this? I asked, picking up the papers with hands that only shook slightly. Protection, Desmond said, sipping his coffee. The same coffee I'd been pretending to drink for days while spitting the poison into tissues. I've frozen all your accounts, darling. It's temporary, just until the doctors can evaluate your mental state. The words hit me like ice water. You froze my accounts. Our accounts legally. The power of attorney you signed after your father's death gives me that authority. He set down his cup with a gentle clink against the saucer. Your behavior lately has been erratic. The accusations, the paranoia about Hayes's death, Dr. Morrison agrees you need help. I stared at the petition. Filed August 7th, yesterday. While I'd been planning how to get him to confess on camera, he'd been filing legal paperwork to have me declared incompetent. You can't just freeze my accounts, I said. That's my inheritance. Our accounts legally, he repeated. And I'm protecting them. Protecting you until you're well again. Credit cards, checking, savings, investment accounts. Everything's temporarily restricted. I'm not sick, Desmond pulled another document from his briefcase, a psychiatric evaluation signed by someone named Dr. Morrison. This says otherwise. I had you evaluated discreetly using your medical records and observations I've documented over the past 6 months. 6 months. Since he'd started poisoning me. Since the arsenic had begun accumulating in my bloodstream, causing the symptoms he was now using to have me declared insane. Dr. Morrison documented everything, Desmond continued. Your obsession with Hayes's accident, the wild theories about your father's death, the paranoid belief that I'm somehow responsible for tragedies that were clearly accidental. Those aren't theories, I said. I have evidence. Desmond's expression shifted concern mixed with pity. That's exactly what concerns us, Leora. You've constructed an entire conspiracy from grief and guilt. You hired a private investigator to follow me. You've been searching my office. You've convinced yourself that the man you married is a murderer. Every accusation was true, but presented this way through the lens of a grieving daughter losing her mind, it sounded like delusion. The court hearing is in 72 hours, Desmond said. They'll determine whether you need a conservatorship, whether someone needs to make decisions for you until you're well. 3 years of marriage, and it came down to this. I owned everything on paper and nothing in reality. I excused myself to the bathroom, locked the door, and pulled out my phone. My fingers shook as I tried to access my bank account. Account restricted, please contact the account administrator. Savings account, investment portfolio, credit cards. Transaction denied, card inactive. I owned a $50 million shipping company, and I couldn't buy coffee. My phone was on Desmond's account plan. My car was registered in both our names. The house belonged to my father's estate, which Desmond was now executor of thanks to that power of attorney. I'm worth $50 million, I whispered to my reflection, and I can't access a dime. My phone buzzed. Text from Grant saw the court filing. Call me, now. I dialed. He answered on the first ring. He filed for conservatorship, Grant said without preamble. Emergency psychiatric hold. I just pulled the documents from the court database. He froze everything, I said. All my accounts, I'm completely locked out. That's the first move. He's not trying to control you, Leora. He's trying to bury you, legally first, then literally. I sat on the edge of the bathtub, phone pressed to my ear. What do you mean? Conservatorship gives him total control of your assets. Then you die from mental illness complications, while institutionalized, maybe suicide, maybe medication interaction. Another tragic loss for the grieving husband. He collects the insurance, liquidates the company, and takes his Grand Cayman flight with millions. The court hearing is in 3 days, which means he's planning to move against you within 2 weeks maximum, maybe sooner if he thinks you're onto him. How many women had Thomas Ridley done this to before me, frozen out, declared crazy, then quietly buried? What do? I asked. Grant was silent for a moment. We activate the trap, tonight. You confront him about Thomas Ridley. Push until he breaks. The cameras will catch everything. And if he doesn't confess, I couldn't finish the sentence. If he just kills me, then we'll have evidence of what he does next, Grant said. Either way, we spring the trap tonight. We're out of time for subtle approaches. He'll know I've been investigating. He already suspects. That's why he filed the petition. He's trying to discredit you before you can accuse him. But if we get him on camera confessing, actually saying he murdered your father, your brother Celeste Blake, then it doesn't matter what psychiatric evaluation he's manufactured. Murder confession trumps competency petition. I thought of the 7 cameras watching my house, the encrypted cloud storage, the evidence we'd already gathered, blood work, audio recordings, fake passports, financial documents. What if he attacks me? I asked. Odette will be in this house. I'll be monitoring the camera feeds in real time from my car parked 2 blocks away. If he makes a move, I call the police immediately. But Leora, Grant's voice softened. You're the bait. You understand that, right? We're using you to draw him out. I understand. You confront him tonight about Thomas Ridley. Tell him you know who he really is. Show him the passport if you have to. Make him react. Make him talk. And whatever happens, stay near the cameras. Living room has the best coverage. I stared at my reflection in the bathroom mirror, pale, thin from 6 months of arsenic poisoning, terrified, but alive, still alive. And I had 72 hours to stay that way. Tonight, I said. I'll do it tonight. I'll be watching, Grant promised. Every second. You're not alone in this. I hung up and gripped the bathroom counterphone pressed to my ear, Grant's voice still echoing in my head with the plan that would either save my life or end it. Tonight, I would walk into the living room and call my husband by his real name, Thomas Ridley, and see if he confessed or killed me. 72 hours until the court hearing, but I had maybe 12 hours before he realized I knew too much to let live. I let the wine glass slip from my trembling fingers, crystal shattered against marble. Cabernet sprayed across ivory silk like arterial blood. Desmond looked up from his laptop, startled by the crash that echoed through the mansion. I can't. My voice broke perfectly, years of amateur theater finally paying dividends. I can't do this anymore. I sank onto the sofa, letting genuine exhaustion show. 3 weeks of playing his devoted wife had left me hollowed out. The trick to selling a breakdown was using real fatigue as scaffolding. Leora. He set the laptop aside, concern creasing his features. What's wrong? Everything. I pressed trembling hands to my face. The rumors about Leonard, the whispers that we. A sob caught in my throat. I know you didn't hurt him. I know it. But everywhere I go, people look at me like I'm complicit in murder. Desmond rose slowly, crossing to where I sat. This was the gamble. Push too hard and he'd retreat. Not hard enough and he'd dismiss my performance. I need you to tell me the truth. I looked up at him through tears I'd manufactured by thinking about my father's final moments. Whatever happened, I've stood by you. But I can't defend what I don't understand. Please, Desmond, help me understand. His expression shifted, calculation flickering behind sympathy. He was measuring whether my breakdown was genuine or strategic. I held his gaze, letting vulnerability bleed through. You really want to know? His voice was soft, almost tender. I need to know. He sat beside me close enough that our knees touched. His hand found mine, fingers interlacing with practiced intimacy. Leonard was dying anyway, Desmond said quietly. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. 6 months, maybe less. The arsenic just accelerated the inevitable. My heart hammered against my ribs. Keep breathing, don't react. Let him fill the silence. He was going to suffer. Desmond continued, thumb stroking across my knuckles. Waste away in some hospice. Drowning in morphine. I spared him that indignity. You poisoned him. I kept my voice neutral, stripped of judgment. I managed his exit. His grip tightened fractionally. There's a difference. Pattern interrupt. He was confessing to 3 murders while stroking my hair, and I had to sit there pretending gratitude for his honesty. What about the investigator? I whispered. The one asking questions about the will. Grant Reeves. Desmond's jaw tightened. He was getting too close, making connections that would have complicated everything. So I handled it. Handled it, how? Does it matter? He studied my face, searching for revulsion or fear. He's gone. The investigation died with him. I leaned into him, resting my head against his shoulder, while my stomach churned with revulsion. Somewhere in this mansion, hidden cameras were recording every word. Grant had installed them during Desmond's business trip to Singapore, 3 pinhole lenses disguised as smoke detector components, their feeds uploading directly to encrypted cloud storage. And my father, the question emerged barely audible. Leonard refused to see reason. Desmond's voice carried no remorse. He threatened to expose certain financial arrangements, to go to the SEC with documentation that would have destroyed everything I'd built. I gave him chances, Leora. Multiple opportunities to walk away quietly. He chose confrontation. Desmond's voice carried no remorse. He threatened to expose certain financial arrangements, to go to the SEC with documentation that would have destroyed everything I'd built. I gave him chances, Leora, multiple opportunities to walk away quietly. My father chose integrity, he chose truth over complicity, and Desmond murdered him for it. But if you think this confession was enough to put Desmond behind bars, let me tell you something about the American justice system. Vague admissions don't hold up in court. I needed him to say the words explicitly, and I had exactly one more chance to get them. Drop a comment below with A. Whether you think Leora should seduce Desmond, or B. Whether she should threaten him to get the full confession. I'm curious which strategy you'd choose in her position. And just so we're clear, while this story is inspired by real revenge cases, I've fictionalized names, locations, and specific details for dramatic effect. So you took care of it, I murmured against his shirt. I protected us. His hand moved to my hair, fingers combing through dark strands. Everything I did to secure our future, to build something lasting. He was talking about my father's murder like it was estate planning, clinical, pragmatic, utterly devoid of human feeling. I stayed there another 20 minutes, letting him hold me while he rationalized 3 homicides as necessary business decisions. When he finally released me to take a phone call, I slipped away to the guest bathroom and vomited until nothing remained. The next morning, I sat across from Grant in his downtown office while he reviewed the recordings. Sunlight slanted through floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating transcripts spread across mahogany. "It's not enough," he said, finally looking up with frustration carved into every line of his face. I stared at him. He admitted poisoning Leonard. He admitted killing Hayes. He admitted murdering my father. He said he managed Leonard's exit, that he handled Hayes, that he took care of your father. Grant tapped the transcript. Defense attorneys will argue he was speaking metaphorically, that managed meant arranging hospice care, that handled meant paying Hayes to drop the investigation. The language is too vague for conviction. Pattern interrupt. We had evidence, like a completed jigsaw puzzle missing the centerpiece. Everything circumstantial, nothing explicit enough to guarantee conviction. So what do I need? My voice was flat, exhausted. The words themselves. Grant met my eyes. I poisoned Leonard Ashford. I killed Marcus Hayes. I murdered Richard Mercer. Explicit confessions using explicit language. Without that, any prosecutor is taking this case to trial with 50-50 odds at best. I checked my phone. The deadline Desmond had set for finalizing the foundation paperwork was 48 hours away. Once those documents were signed, his access to my father's fortune would be legally ironclad. Then I'll get them, I said quietly. Tonight. The bedroom door had a lock on the outside. 3 years of marriage, but Desmond's hand went to it like he'd been planning this moment since the day we moved in. That night, I'd promised Grant explicit confessions. The next afternoon, Desmond walked into our bedroom carrying a manila folder and wearing the expression of a man who'd already won. Judge Eleanor Vale signed the preliminary order this afternoon, he said. You're officially under my care now. I looked up from the book I've been pretending to read. Preliminary doesn't mean permanent. I still have the hearing. You won't make it to the hearing, darling. He said it casually, like mentioning rain. What does that mean? It means Dr. Morrison's evaluation was very convincing. The court agrees you're a danger to yourself, that you require immediate supervision. Desmond took the book from my hands. The full hearing is in 36 hours, but temporary restrictions are effective immediately. Based on lies. Based on medical testimony. His mask dissolved completely. No more pretense of concern, just cold calculation in eyes that had never loved me. The court order restricts unsupervised communications, he continued, holding out his hand. I'll hold your phone for now. You can't. I can do whatever's necessary to keep you safe from yourself. Your phone, Leora. I placed it in his palm. He pocketed it without checking the screen. You should rest, he said, moving toward the door. I'll check on you in a few hours. The door closed. The lock clicked. I stared at solid mahogany, processing the sound. 7 cameras hidden throughout the room were capturing everything: Desmond's confidence, my shock, that clicking lock, all recorded and uploading to encrypted storage. I waited 3 minutes listening. No footsteps, no shadow under the door. The bathroom air vent required a screwdriver, but Grant had loosened the screws enough that I could turn them by hand. The backup phone sat in a waterproof case behind the ductwork. I texted, "Locked in bedroom." He took my phone, moving faster than we thought. Grant's response came within 30 seconds. "Cameras live, don't panic. Let him think he's won. He'll make a mistake." What if the mistake is killing me before the hearing? Then we'll have evidence of what he does next, Grant said. "Either way, we spring the trap tonight. We're out of time for subtle approaches. He'll know I've been investigating. He already suspects. That's why he filed the petition. He's trying to discredit you before you can accuse him. But if we get him on camera confessing, actually saying he murdered your father, your brother Celeste Blake, then it doesn't matter what psychiatric evaluation he's manufactured. Murder confession trumps competency petition." I thought of the 7 cameras watching my house, the encrypted cloud storage, the evidence we'd already gathered: blood work, audio recordings, fake passports, financial documents. What if he attacks me? I asked. Odette will be in the house. I'll be monitoring the camera feeds in real time from my car parked 2 blocks away. If he makes a move, I call the police immediately. But Leora, Grant's voice softened. You're the bait. You understand that, right? We're using you to draw him out. I understand. You confront him tonight about Thomas Ridley. Tell him you know who he really is. Show him the passport if you have to. Make him react. Make him talk. And whatever happens, stay near the cameras. Living room has the best coverage. I stared at my reflection in the bathroom mirror, pale, thin from 6 months of arsenic poisoning, terrified, but alive, still alive, and I had 72 hours to stay that way. Tonight, I said. I'll do it tonight. I'll be watching, Grant promised. Every second. You're not alone in this. I hung up and gripped the bathroom counterphone pressed to my ear, Grant's voice still echoing in my head with the plan that would either save my life or end it. Tonight I would walk into the living room and call my husband by his real name, Thomas Ridley, and see if he confessed or killed me. 36 hours until the guardianship hearing, but I had maybe 12 hours before he realized I knew too much to let live. Hours crawled past. Sunlight faded to darkness. I lay on the bed fully clothed, calculating. 36 hours until the hearing. Desmond needed me discredited or dead before then. At 10:30, the lock turned. Desmond entered carrying a ceramic mug, steam rising from dark liquid. He'd changed into casual clothes, linen shirt, tailored slacks. I made your coffee the way you like it. He set the mug on my nightstand. Thought we could talk about what happens after the hearing. The smell hit me immediately. Bitter under the cream chemical tang cutting through French roast. You said I won't make it to the hearing, I said quietly. A slip of the tongue. He sat in the bedside chair watching me. Drink your coffee, darling. It'll help you sleep. Pattern interrupt. The coffee smelled exactly like the tea Leonard drank every night for 6 months before he died. I lifted the mug with trembling hands. Real fear flooded my system. The ceramic was warm against my palms. That's right, Desmond murmured. I sipped, barely wetting my lips, and palmed the mouthful into tissues positioned on my lap. Swallowed air. Sipped again. More tissues. So tired suddenly, I whispered, setting the half-empty mug down. The coffee is making me. That's right. Just sleep now. I lay back against pillows, controlling my breathing. Slow, deep, regular. Eyes closed but not squeezed shut. Every muscle deliberately relaxed. Desmond stayed in the chair. I felt his gaze tracking the rise and fall of my chest. Minutes stretched into eternities. My heart hammered so hard I was certain he could see it through my shirt. 10 minutes. 15. Finally he stood. Footsteps crossed carpet. The door opened. By morning it'll be over, he said quietly. The lock clicked shut. I waited 3 minutes by counting heartbeats. Retrieved the backup phone. Poured the remaining coffee into the sample jar Grant had hidden in the vanity. Sealed it, labeled it, 10:32 p.m., October 2025. The jackhammer's echo reached the mansion at 6:47 a.m. Grant's excavation team, breaking through the Pier 9 warehouse floor, 1.2 meters down, exactly where Leonard's hidden map said they'd find Celeste Blake's body. I stood at the bedroom window listening to construction noise drift across the bay, while Desmond slept in the guest room confident I was dead or dying behind the locked door. The backup phone buzzed with Grant's text, "Cadaver dogs alerted. Digging now." 20 minutes later, another message arrived with a photo. Human remains wrapped in deteriorating tarp, partially decomposed silver ring still visible on skeletal left hand. Female buried approximately 10 to 15 years based on decomposition, Grant's text quoted the excavation foreman. Wedding band engraved CB. Odette Blake had flown in from Miami overnight. Her voice came through on the next message audio recording Grant had captured. "That's my mother's ring, the one Celeste wore at her wedding." "DNA confirmation in 4 hours," Grant texted. "But we already know who this is." Leonard had known. The fingerprint-locked box, the hidden map coordinates marked in his careful handwriting. He'd discovered where Desmond buried his first wife and documented it, waiting for the right moment to act. Desmond had killed him before that moment arrived. Now, 13 years later, Celeste Blake was being lifted from the concrete floor of a warehouse Desmond had purchased 6 months after her disappearance. The property acquisition suddenly made terrible sense, buying the crime scene to ensure it stayed buried. At 7:30, the bedroom lock turned. I sat at the vanity, fully dressed, makeup perfect. Desmond froze in the doorway, shock naked on his face for 3 full seconds before the mask slammed back into place. "You're awake," he said carefully. "I thought you'd sleep longer after that coffee." I poured it out. I met his eyes in the mirror. It smelled wrong, bitter like the tea Father used to drink. His gaze swept the room, landing on the nightstand. The empty mug sat exactly where he'd left it, tissue-absorbed coffee creating the illusion I'd consumed it all. "Probably just old cream," he said smoothly. "I'll make fresh breakfast." "That would be nice." He studied me another moment, calculating, then left. The lock didn't click this time. He needed me mobile enough to stumble downstairs before collapsing, making the death look less suspicious than a locked room poisoning. Pattern interrupt. 13 years. Celeste. Blake had been under that concrete floor, and Desmond had walked across it 1,000 times on his way to steal my father's company. I waited until his footsteps faded, then retrieved the backup phone. Grant's update was waiting. "Celeste, Blake confirmed. DNA preliminary matches dental records from Missing Persons Database 2012. Simone Torres setting up live feed at Federal Prosecutor's Office now. Ready when you are." I texted back, "How long do I have to get him talking?" "Prosecutor needs explicit admission of all 3 murders. Take your time. We're recording everything." Push his ego narcissists can't resist explaining how clever they are. I positioned myself in the living room at noon, choosing the chair that put me squarely in frame for 3 hidden cameras. Desmond sat across from me with fresh coffee, his own this time, I noticed. He wasn't taking chances. "I've been wondering something," I said, keeping my tone curious rather than accusatory. "Did Father and Hayes really trust you, or were you just better at hiding what you are?" His expression shifted. The careful concern evaporated, replaced by something colder. "Trust?" He laughed, sharp and ugly. "Your father was a senile old man clinging to a dying company. Hayes was a reckless drunk who couldn't keep his mouth shut. So you what saved the company by killing them?" "I built that company." Desmond leaned forward, anger bleeding through every word. "Leonard inherited wealth and squandered it on outdated manufacturing models. I modernized operations, secured contracts he was too proud to pursue, and he repaid me by threatening to dissolve the partnership." "How did you do it?" I asked quietly. "The arsenic. 12.4 parts per million in his evening tea for 6 months." The confession spilled out like he'd been waiting years to tell someone. "Just enough to mimic pancreatic cancer symptoms. The doctors never suspected. Why would they? Rich old man gets sick and dies. It's practically a cliché." "And Hayes got suspicious about the will, started asking questions, hiring investigators. So I paid Bryce Hartley $80,000 to rig the yacht. Made it look like an accident, drunk. Executive takes his boat out alone. Equipment fails, tragic drowning." My hands stayed steady in my lap. Somewhere in Grant's office, federal prosecutor Simone Torres was watching this unfold in real time, recording every word. What about me? I whispered. Was last night's coffee supposed to be an accident too? Desmond smiled. 18.7 parts per million arsenic trioxide, enough to kill you 3 times over. You were supposed to die quietly in your sleep, another tragedy for the grieving widower. 2 million in life insurance, full control of your father's estate through the guardianship order. Pattern interrupt. Watching him confess was like watching a dam break, 11 minutes of poison pouring out unstoppable once it started flowing. And Celeste? The name made him pause. Your first wife. How do you know about... He stopped recalculating. Celeste was a mistake. Young stupid threatening to go to the SEC about accounts I'd reorganized. I couldn't let her destroy everything I'd built, so I handled it. Miami, 2012. Drove her body back to San Francisco and a rental truck buried her under the warehouse floor before the concrete pour. Bought the property 6 months later to make sure nobody ever dug there. 11 minutes 47 seconds. That's how long his confession lasted, cataloging 3 murders with the clinical precision of a man who'd never expected consequences. Every detail, every victim, every dollar amount streaming live to federal prosecutors. He finished and leaned back, completely unaware that 7 cameras had captured everything, that Simone Torres had watched it all, that Grant was already en route with FBI agents. Now that you know everything, darling, drink your coffee. He gestured to the cup he'd brought me. This one you're going to finish. I pushed the coffee cup back across the table toward Desmond and pointed at the smoke detector above his head. That's camera 4 of 7, I said quietly. Federal prosecutor Simone Torres just watched you confess to 3 murders in real time. His face went blank. Not shocked blank, like his brain needed 3 full seconds to process language that shouldn't be possible. You're bluffing. 7 cameras, master bedroom, study, basement, kitchen, garage, bathroom, and right here in the living room where you just spent 11 minutes 47 seconds confessing to poisoning Leonard, paying Bryce to kill Hayes, and burying Celeste under a warehouse floor. I held up the backup phone, showing him Grant's text time-stamped 2 minutes ago. Federal warrant signed. 8 agents en route. ETA 90 seconds. Desmond's expression cycled through disbelief to rage to something close to terror. His hands gripped the chair arms hard enough that knuckles went white. Simone Torres has the footage, I continued. The warrant was signed 8 minutes ago. Listen, you can hear them coming. Sirens cut through afternoon silence, multiple vehicles close and getting closer. He lunged for the coffee cup, the poisoned one he'd brought me, but I'd already moved it beyond reach. His hand swept empty air. You destroyed everything, he whispered. Everything I built. You built it on corpses. I just made sure people could see them. The front door exploded inward, battering ram against solid oak hinges tearing from the frame with sounds like gunshots. 8 FBI agents swarmed the living room, weapons drawn, voices overlapping commands. On the ground, hands behind your head, do it now. Desmond stood frozen, staring at the doorway like he still couldn't believe this was happening. 2 agents grabbed his arms, forcing him down. Handcuffs clicked shut around wrists that had held me, comforted me, planned my murder. Desmond Cross, also known as Thomas Ridley, you are under arrest for the murders of Leonard Mercer, Hayes Mercer, and Celeste Blake. The lead agent, a woman in her 40s with steel gray eyes and FBI insignia on tactical vest, read from a warrant. Additional charges include identity fraud, attempted murder, insurance fraud, and conspiracy to commit murder. Grant appeared in the doorway behind the agents, watching Desmond with an expression I couldn't read. Not triumph, not even satisfaction, just quiet certainty that justice was finally arriving 13 years late. You have the right to remain silent, the agent continued. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. Desmond twisted to look at me, still kneeling on my living room floor. You destroyed everything. You already said that, I replied. Pattern interrupt. 3 years. I'd watched him walk through this house like he owned it. Owned me, and now 8 FBI agents were reading him Miranda rights in my living room. They pulled him to his feet, steering him toward the shattered doorway. Outside, 4 black SUVs blocked the circular driveway. A second team was arriving with covered stretchers, Celeste Blake's remains from Pier 9, evidence tag visible even from inside. The momentary distraction cost them. Desmond jerked sideways, breaking the grip of the agent on his left. His shoulder slammed into the agent on his right, sending her stumbling into the doorframe. He ran, not toward the front gate where vehicles blocked the exit, toward the back of the property through the hedge maze we'd never bothered maintaining, heading for the service entrance at the south wall. Suspect is mobile south exit toward Service Road. Agents pursued, but Desmond had 30 seconds head start and knew the property layout. My phone buzzed Grant calling. He's running for the airport, Grant said without preamble. Bryce is already there. Will Bryce stop him? Watch. 12 minutes later, Desmond reached Bay Area Executive Airport. Grant tracked his movement via phone location and highway cameras narrating for me in real time while FBI vehicles raced to catch up. The stolen car, a contingency plan he'd arranged weeks ago, backup identity, and escape route screeched to a stop on the private runway. Desmond ran for the helicopter waiting with rotors already positioned for quick start. Just get to international waters, I heard him mutter through Grant's audio feed from Bryce's phone nearby. The Cayman account is still active. Airport security called after him, "Sir, that aircraft is grounded by federal order." Desmond climbed into the cockpit anyway. He had a commercial pilot license from his Thomas Ridley days before he'd reinvented himself as Desmond Cross. The charter pilot had fled after Grant's warning call, but Desmond didn't need him. He started the ignition sequence. The helicopter engine roared to life. Not fast enough, he said to no one. The main rotor began spinning, slowly at first, then faster, building momentum. Desmond's hands moved across controls with practiced precision, throttle collective cyclic, everything responding correctly. Pattern interrupt. The helicopter rotor spun faster, louder, but the landing skids never left the tarmac. A warning flashed across the flight control display. Flight control override active. Contact maintenance immediately. Desmond slammed controls forward. Nothing. Pulled them back. Nothing. The aircraft sat frozen on the runway while the rotor screamed overhead, all that power generating zero lift. He looked down at the auxiliary panel and saw the remote access indicator lit red. Someone had locked the flight control system using emergency override codes. Codes Desmond had given to Bryce Hartley 2 years ago when he'd trusted his accomplice with contingency protocols. FBI vehicles surrounded the runway, 12 black SUVs forming a perimeter with nowhere left to go. A megaphone crackled to life. Exit the aircraft with your hands visible. This is your only warning. Through Grant's phone screen, I watched the live helicopter footage, Desmond surrounded by 12 FBI vehicles, rotor spinning uselessly, flight controls locked by the man he'd paid $80,000 to kill my brother. He slammed his fists against the cockpit controls once, twice, then his shoulders dropped. Even from the aerial view, I could see the exact moment he understood there was nowhere left to run. 3 months after his arrest, Desmond Cross sat in federal court, wearing a navy suit and the same expression he'd worn at board meetings, mildly interested, professionally attentive, as if murder charges were just another quarterly review. The helicopter extraction had taken 40 minutes. FBI tactical team tear gas negotiations through the cockpit window, while Bryce Hartley watched from the terminal and confirmed the flight controls would stay locked until Desmond surrendered. He'd eventually climbed out with hands raised, still believing he could talk his way through this. Now, November sunlight slanted through tall windows of Courtroom 7 in the Federal Building. Every seat packed. Media filled the back rows, sketch artists capturing angles for evening news. Odette Blake sat in the front gallery beside Grant, hands folded in her lap, waiting to hear how her mother died. Judge Eleanor Vale entered from chambers, a black woman in her 60s, with silver hair and eyes that had seen 3 decades of federal cases. Everyone rose. The defendant is charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder in furtherance of fraud, Judge Vale said once we'd all sat again. How does the defendant plead? Desmond's attorney, a silk-suited defense lawyer from Chicago, stood. Not guilty on all counts, Your Honor. Simone Torres rose for the prosecution. She'd spent 3 months building this case, coordinating with FBI forensics, interviewing witnesses, reviewing every second of footage from those 7 hidden cameras. Over 13 years, Simone began, voice carrying to every corner of the courtroom. The defendant murdered 3 people and stole $1.1 million using identities he constructed like costumes. Leonard Mercer poisoned slowly with arsenic over 6 months. Hayes Mercer killed via sabotaged yacht when he discovered the truth. Celeste Blake, the defendant's first wife, buried under a warehouse floor in 2012 when she threatened to expose his fraud. She paused, letting that sink in. We will prove each murder was calculated, premeditated, and executed with chilling precision. We will show you the defendant's own confession recorded on hidden cameras in his home. We will present physical evidence, including lethal arsenic samples and the remains of Celeste Blake recovered from coordinates the defendant himself referenced in surveillance footage. Desmond sat perfectly still through all of it. Occasionally, he took notes on the legal pad in front of him, pen moving in neat script, like he was reviewing contract terms. When Simone described Leonard's 6-month poisoning in detail, the tea ritual, the careful dosing, the manufactured symptoms, Desmond circled a phrase on his pad and showed it to his attorney. No visible emotion, no flinch when prosecutors described Hayes's yacht exploding, no reaction when Simone held up the photo of Celeste's skeletal remains with the wedding ring still on her finger. I sat in the gallery beside Grant watching the man I'd married for 3 years demonstrate absolutely nothing resembling human feeling. He doesn't even pretend, I whispered to Grant. Narcissists don't think they need to, Grant murmured back. He's convinced the jury will see his logic, that they'll understand why he had to kill them. On day 3 of the trial, Simone called me to the witness stand. The courtroom felt different from up there, more exposed. I could see every face in the jury box, 8 women, 4 men, ages ranging from 20s to 70s. All watching me with expressions somewhere between sympathy and curiosity. Ms. Mercer, Simone said gently, I'm going to ask you to read portions of your father's diary aloud. Can you do that? I nodded. My hands shook, taking the leather-bound journal from the evidence clerk. August 12th, 2024. I began finding the marked page. The weakness is worse. Desmond insists I see Dr. Hunt again. I trust him to handle things while I'm ill. My voice steadied as I continued. August 30th. My hands shake when I try to sign documents. The nausea comes in waves. Desmond has been so good to Leora through all this. September 3rd, Desmond helped me update my will today. I can barely hold a pen anymore. He's been like a son to me. Pattern interrupt. My father's handwriting deteriorated across those diary pages, steady in August, shaky in September, barely legible by November, a 6-month murder documented in his own trembling script. September 28th. The doctors can't explain why I'm getting worse. Desmond research specialists in Boston. I don't know what I'd do without him. October 15th. Sometimes I think about the tea, the bitter taste under the honey, but that's paranoid. Desmond, wouldn't he loves Leora? He wouldn't hurt our family. My voice cracked. I swallowed, continued. October 29th. I know what's happening. The fingerprint box is hidden. If you're reading this, Leora, I'm sorry I didn't stop him sooner. The arsenic affects my coordination, my thinking. By the time I understood, I couldn't. The entry stopped mid-sentence. My father's hand too weak to finish. November 14th. I read through tears I didn't bother hiding. I can barely hold the pen. He's killing me and I can't even tell my daughter without him knowing. 3 jury members were crying openly. The gallery sat in absolute silence, except for my voice reading my father's slow realization that his trusted son-in-law was murdering him while his neurological function deteriorated too much to stop it. I looked at Desmond. He was reviewing his notes, circling another phrase, completely unmoved. Did your father describe his symptoms in detail? Simone asked. Every day. For 6 months. I met her eyes. 12.4 parts per million arsenic in his system when he finally died. Simone moved to her next exhibit, a small recording device sealed in an evidence bag. This is a voice memo recovered from Hayes Mercer's phone, she told the court. Recorded 3 days before his death. I'm going to play it now. The courtroom audio system crackled to life. Hayes's voice filled the space and my heart broke all over again. I found a passport in Desmond's safe. Thomas Ridley, born 1982, same face, different name. He's not who he says he is. Pattern interrupt. Hayes's voice cut off mid-sentence 48 hours before Bryce Hartley rigged his yacht to explode. I'm going to the police tomorrow. If something happens to me, this recording proves Desmond isn't Desmond Cross. A pause. I heard my brother breathing, gathering courage. Leora, if you're hearing this, get away from him. He's dangerous. I love... The recording ended abruptly. Static, then silence. The courtroom sat in stunned silence after Hayes's recording ended his last words to me, hanging in the air like an accusation. I looked at Desmond, waiting for some flicker of recognition that he'd killed my brother to silence this exact warning. Instead, he sighed quietly, professionally, and made another note on his legal pad, as if Hayes's desperate final message was just one more tedious piece of evidence to refute. Day 5 of trial, Desmond's defense attorney stood before Judge Vale and asked the question that made my blood freeze. Even if convicted, Your Honor, doesn't California law grant my client inheritance rights to the $50 million Mercer estate as Leonard Mercer's legal son-in-law? The courtroom erupted. Reporters leaned forward. Odette Blake's hand found Grant's arm in the gallery. I felt my chest constrict. The attorney continued smoothly. California community property law is clear. Assets acquired during marriage belong equally to both spouses. The Mercer Shipping Company and associated assets should partially transfer to Mr. Cross regardless of any criminal verdict. Simone Torres shot to her feet. The Slayer statute prevents murderers from profiting from their crimes, Your Honor. But the Mercer shipping assets predate the alleged crimes, the defense countered. My client has legal claim regardless of verdict. We're talking about marital property rights established through lawful marriage. Judge Vale raised one hand for silence. The courtroom stilled. The court is aware of California's Slayer statute, she said. However, counsel raises a legitimate question about community property claims predating criminal acts. She paused. Fortunately, this matter was anticipated. She lifted a sealed manila envelope from her desk. This envelope was filed with the court 6 months before Leonard Mercer's death. It's marked, Leonard Mercer Confidential will open only if Desmond Cross survives me. My heart stopped. 6 months before father died, when his handwriting was already shaking, when he knew. Judge Vale broke the seal and extracted several pages. I, Leonard Mercer, being of sound mind and body, hereby transfer all assets, holdings, and equity in Mercer Shipping Company to an irrevocable void trust, accessible only to direct bloodline descendants. She looked up at Desmond. The trust includes explicit clause no spouse, step-relative, or non-blood family member may claim inheritance under any circumstance. All previous wills are hereby nullified. Desmond stood halfway up, then caught himself. His voice carried across the silent courtroom anyway. That's not possible. I watched him sign the other will. You watched him sign a decoy, Judge Vale said quietly. This document was notarized by 3 independent witnesses and filed under seal with instructions to open only if you outlived him, which you did. Pattern, interrupt. My father had known for 6 months that Desmond was poisoning him, and instead of running or fighting, he'd quietly rewritten his will to ensure the murderer got nothing. Your client is legally entitled to $0 of the Mercer estate, Judge Vale told the defense attorney. The Slayer statute is irrelevant. Leonard Mercer disinherited him while still alive. Desmond's mask shattered completely. He stood up, forcing his defense attorney's hand away as he took the stand under a brutal cross-examination. His pride couldn't stomach losing to a dead man's hidden will, and that toxic narcissism became his undoing. Instead of denying the charges, he arrogantly defended his actions as tactical business decisions, showing zero remorse to the horrified jury. He was furious not because he had taken innocent lives, but because I had been clever enough to outsmart his final trap. 2 days later, the jury deliberated for 9 hours. On the charge of first-degree murder of Leonard Mercer, the foreman read, "We find the defendant guilty." On the charge of first-degree murder of Hayes Mercer, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of first-degree murder of Celeste Blake, we find the defendant guilty. Guilty on all counts. 3 murders. Attempted murder. Interstate fraud totaling $1.1 million. Identity falsification across 3 states. Judge Eleanor Vale looked at Desmond with an expression of cold finality. Mr. Cross, you are hereby sentenced to 3 consecutive life terms without possibility of parole at ADX Florence Supermax Prison. You will serve 23 hours per day in solitary confinement in an 80-square-foot concrete cell. You will die in prison, and the estate you murdered for will never be yours. I watched federal marshals lead Desmond Cross out of the courtroom in chains for the last time, past Odette Blake, who stood silent in the gallery holding her mother's silver ring, recovered from Celeste's remains. 3 consecutive life sentences at ADX. Florence, the Supermax prison, where he'd spend 23 hours a day in an 80-square-foot concrete cell until he died. He'd killed 3 people for $50 million he'd never touch, and he'd confessed to every detail because his narcissism couldn't tolerate anyone thinking he wasn't brilliant. The day after Desmond's sentencing, Grant called with news that should have felt like victory. Miami police wanted to reopen Celeste Blake's 2012 case, and they needed my testimony for what could be 12 to 18 months of depositions hearings and reliving every detail of 3 murders I'd already survived once. Miami PD has enough to charge him with Celeste's murder separately, Grant explained across his office desk. Marina District sunlight slanted through windows behind him. They want you to testify about the pattern, the confession footage, the timeline. Build a standalone case for Florida jurisdiction. I stared at the folder he'd placed in front of me. Crime scene photos from 2012. Celeste Blake's apartment building with the corroded balcony railing. Autopsy reports. Witness statements from neighbors who'd heard nothing suspicious. He already has 3 life sentences, I said quietly. What's the point of a 4th? Closure for Odette, justice for Celeste. Another jurisdiction holding him accountable. Grant's voice was gentle but factual. It matters legally. It matters symbolically. How long would it take? 12 to 18 months minimum. Multiple trips to Miami for depositions. Grand jury testimony. Possibly another trial if his defense fights extradition. I closed the folder without opening it. 3 years trapped in Desmond's web. I said, 3 months building the federal case. Weeks in trial listening to my father's diary and my brother's last words. I gave them everything I had, Grant. Every piece of evidence, every testimony, every moment of reliving the worst parts of my life. He nodded, already understanding where this was going. Desmond Cross will die in a DX Florence, I continued. He'll spend 23 hours a day in an 80-square-foot concrete cell until his heart stops. That's enough. It has to be enough because I need to take my life back. You don't owe anyone more justice than you've already delivered, Grant said. I need to rebuild Mercer Shipping, process what happened, honor Father and Hayes by actually living instead of just surviving. I met his eyes. Desmond murdered 3 people and stole 6 years of my 20s. I'm not giving him 12 more months. Grant took the folder back. I'll tell Miami you're declining. They'll understand. Will they? They should. His expression softened. You destroyed a serial killer who'd been operating for 13 years. You got him 3 consecutive life sentences and prevented future victims. That's more than most people accomplish in a lifetime of law enforcement. Pattern interrupt. 6 years. I'd given Desmond 6 years of my 20s trapped in his web, and now they wanted 12 to 18 months more for a 4th life sentence he'd never serve. There's one thing I need to do, I said, before I can move forward. 1 month later, I flew to Colorado. The drive from Denver to ADX Florence took 3 hours through frozen December landscape. Snow-covered plains stretched endlessly in every direction, broken only by the occasional cluster of buildings huddled against wind. The prison itself appeared on the horizon like something from a nightmare concrete fortress, isolated in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by chain link and razor wire. Security processing took 90 minutes. Metal detectors, pat-down searches, paperwork documenting the visit, warnings about acceptable behavior. 15 minutes maximum, the guard told me. She was in her 40s, weathered face, suggesting years of working supermax security. Glass partition only, no physical contact. Any threats or disturbances end the visit immediately. I understand. The inmate has been informed of your visit. He's been... She paused, choosing words carefully, anticipating it. The visiting room was small, sterile, divided by reinforced glass 2 inches thick. I sat in the metal chair on my side and waited. Desmond appeared 3 minutes later, escorted by 2 guards. Orange jumpsuit, hands cuffed, thinner than I remembered face, gaunt after a month of isolation. He sat on his side of the partition and picked up the phone receiver. I picked up mine. You came, he said, something like triumph in his voice. I came to say one thing, I replied. Then I'm never thinking about you again. His expression shifted, calculation replacing satisfaction. You thought you were smarter than my father, I said calmly. You thought intelligence was the only thing that mattered. But Leonard loved me enough to prepare evidence that destroyed you. The fingerprint box, the hidden will, the map to Celeste's body. He knew what you were doing, and he protected me anyway. He was weak, Desmond interrupted. Sentimental. I would have won if not for, you'll die here having murdered for money you'll never touch. Father's legacy is love, a daughter who survived a company that will thrive, evidence that saved lives. Your legacy is nothing. An isolated cell. Guards who don't care how intelligent you think you are. Screaming explanations nobody wants to hear. Pattern interrupt. The glass partition between us was 2 inches thick, but the real barrier was the one I'd built inside myself, the wall that said he couldn't hurt me anymore, couldn't touch me, couldn't matter. I came here so you'd know, I continued. Leonard may have died, but his love won. You'll be forgotten. And I'll spend the rest of my life honoring what he and Hayes built instead of wasting another second thinking about what you destroyed. Leora, you can't just, I need you to understand. I stood up and hung the phone receiver back on the hook, cutting him off mid-sentence. He jumped to his feet, slamming his palm against the glass. His mouth moved, shouting words I couldn't hear through the barrier. The guards moved toward him, ready to intervene. I turned and walked toward the exit without looking back. That was the fastest visit we've had this year, the guard said as she escorted me out. Most people stay the full 15 minutes. I said everything I needed to say. Through the rearview mirror, I watched ADX Florence disappear into frozen Colorado plains, the concrete fortress where Desmond would spend 23 hours a day in 80 square feet until he died screaming explanations to guards who didn't care about his intelligence. I turned the radio on, found a station playing something light and forgettable, and drove toward Denver International, thinking not about the man behind the glass, but about the shipping company board meeting scheduled for Monday morning. 3 years of my life. I wasn't giving him another second. The new headstone read, Celeste Blake, 1984 to 2012, beloved sister finally home. 13 years after Desmond buried her under Pier 9 warehouse concrete, Odette finally had a place to say goodbye. Sacramento Memorial Cemetery in late December was quiet, empty, except for the two of us standing beside fresh earth. Winter sun slanted through bare oak trees. The grave marker was simple granite purchased with victim restitution funds the federal court had allocated from Desmond's frozen accounts. Odette knelt and placed her mother's silver ring, the one recovered from Celeste's skeletal hand, on the ground beside white roses. Her fingers trembled as she touched the engraved name. 13 years I searched for her, Odette said quietly. 13 years she was under concrete while he walked free, married, you killed your father and brother. I stood silent beside her, offering presents without words. She's home now, I said finally, and he'll never walk free again. Odette stood brushing dirt from her knees. Thank you for not letting him win, for both of us. We stayed another 20 minutes watching groundskeepers place final plantings around the headstone. I'd offered to pay for the burial plot and marker myself, but Odette had insisted on using restitution funds. It matters that his money paid for this, she'd explained. He took her away. His assets should bring her home. 2 weeks later, I stood in Mercer Shipping headquarters for the first time as chief executive officer. The boardroom, Pacific Heights building, 16th floor, windows overlooking the bay my father had navigated for 40 years, was full. 8 directors, Grant as legal counsel, senior executives who'd weathered the transition from Leonard's death through Desmond's arrest to this moment. Ms. Mercer, the board chairman said, rising to shake my hand, it's our honor to officially appoint you Chief Executive Officer of Mercer Shipping. I was 27, the youngest CEO in the company's 70-year history, survivor of attempted murder, daughter of the man whose portrait now hung on the wall behind me. My first act as CEO, I said, looking around the table at faces both familiar and new, is dedicating this room to the men who built this company and protected it even after death. The Leonard and Hayes Mercer Memorial Conference Room. I gestured to the 2 portraits I'd commissioned. Leonard at 60, steady gaze and confident smile from before Desmond poisoned him. Hayes at 32, caught mid-laugh during a company sailing trip the year before Bryce sabotaged his yacht. These men loved this company, I continued. They died protecting it. Every decision we make in this room honors their legacy. Pattern interrupt. 27 years old. CEO of a $50 million company, survivor of attempted murder. And somehow the hardest thing was hanging my father's portrait, knowing he'd never see me lead the company he built. After the meeting, Grant stayed behind while others filed out. "Your father would be proud," he said quietly. "Hayes, too." "I hope so." I looked at their portraits. "There's one more thing. Something I want to announce tomorrow." I pulled out the folder I'd been preparing for 3 weeks. The Leonard Mercer Foundation for Domestic Violence and Gaslighting Survivors. $3 million from Desmond's confiscated Cayman accounts, the money he stole through fraud and murder, will now fund legal aid therapy and emergency housing for victims escaping abusive situations. Grant studied the documents. $3 million, that's roughly 250 victims we can help each year. "My father's legacy shouldn't be how he died," I said. "It should be how his death saves others." "You want me on the board?" "I need you on the board. Someone who understands what these victims face, what it takes to gather evidence, build cases, survive the aftermath." He nodded slowly. "I'm in." That evening, back at the mansion, I opened my laptop to find an email waiting. From Claire Donovan's subject, "Possible additional victim. Ms. Mercer, I read about your case in the news. My sister died in 2008 under circumstances similar to what I've learned about Desmond Cross's pattern. Sudden illness, quick deterioration, convenient inheritance for her husband who disappeared 6 months after her death. The coroner ruled natural causes, but I've always suspected. Will there be investigations into his other victims? Does justice extend to families like mine? I've waited 8 years for answers. Please contact me if you're pursuing additional cases. Claire Donovan, Portland, Oregon." I stared at the email for a long time, reading and rereading. Pattern interrupt. How many Claire Donovans were out there waiting for justice from crimes Desmond committed before he ever found me? I could spend years chasing Desmond's past, track every suspicious death in cities he'd lived, interview potential victims from Portland, Miami, Chicago, all the places Thomas Ridley had operated before becoming Desmond Cross, build case after case until every crime was documented. Or I could choose to live. I started typing. "Dear Claire, I understand your pain and you're not alone. The FBI agent who handled my case is Special Agent Marcus Wright, contact below. They can help investigate potential connections to other crimes. Our foundation offers legal resources and support for families seeking justice. I'm attaching information about services available to you. But I need to be honest, I can't personally pursue every case. I spent 3 years trapped by what Desmond did to me. I won't spend the rest of my life chasing what he might have done to others. You deserve answers. Your sister deserves justice. The resources I'm providing can help, but my part in this story is finished. I hope you find peace. Leora Mercer." I hit send, then closed the laptop and walked to the mansion windows overlooking San Francisco Bay. Somewhere in those dark waters was Pier 9, where Celeste had been buried for 13 years. Somewhere in Colorado was ADX Florence, where Desmond would die in isolation. And here I was, 27, alive, CEO of my father's company, with a foundation that would help hundreds of people Desmond's pattern of abuse left behind. 3 life sentences wasn't justice for everyone he'd hurt. But it was enough for me to finally truly begin living. 200 people filled the Marina District Boathouse on a Friday night in January 2026, drinking champagne and celebrating the 47 women the Leonard Mercer Foundation had helped escape domestic violence in its first 3 months. It was living proof that death could create life, that stolen money could save survivors, and that a father's legacy mattered far more than a murderer's revenge. String lights hung from exposed beams above tables covered in white linen. Judge Eleanor Vale stood near the expansive windows, with Grant deeply discussing expansion plans for the center. Odette Blake moved gracefully through the warm crowd, introducing former victims to fresh employment opportunities. I took the microphone at 8 o'clock. "My father and brother didn't choose how they died," I began, my voice echoing clearly. "But we choose what their deaths create. Tonight we celebrate 47 women who found freedom because Leonard and Hayes Mercer's names mean hope." A moving video montage played on screens throughout the room, detailing stories of medical, legal, and housing aid. Then a beneficiary in her 30s took the stage, her steady eyes sweeping the audience. "3 months ago, my ex-husband had convinced everyone I was unstable," she said. "The foundation gave me legal aid and 6 months' rent. I'm alive because of this room." At 8:30, Odette took the stage. For 13 years, Celeste was defined by how she died, she said softly. Tonight, see how she lived teaching third graders about tide pools and telling terrible jokes. She displayed photos of a vibrant, laughing Celeste. My sister believed kindness was stronger than intelligence, Odette continued. Desmond Cross was brilliant, but Celeste was kind. Her legacy outlives his. I realized then that I needed to remember my father and brother for how they lived, not how they were taken. Suddenly, a woman in a teacher's cardigan stood up. Ms. Blake taught me to read in 2011, she said, tears in her eyes. She told us that you cannot save every starfish washed ashore, but the one you do save matters completely. 47 starfish are back in the ocean tonight. At 11, Grant found me on the darkened dock. He held up a set of keys. Your father kept his first ship at Pier 12. Trust instructions said to give you these when you were ready to remember who you were before Desmond. We walked over to a meticulously maintained 30-foot sailboat. Painted in bold white letters on the dark hull was the name Lyora's Hope. He renamed it while Desmond was poisoning him, I whispered. He knew you'd survive, Grant said gently. Let's sail. We cut through the dark waters of San Francisco Bay under a canopy of stars. Grant handled the tiller while I sat on the bow watching the lights reflect off the black waves. I watched the sky shift from heavy black to deep sapphire, and finally to a gorgeous, blazing gold. At dawn, I called Odette. I slept through the night without nightmares, she said. Me too, I replied, watching the sunrise over the Golden Bay. We are finally free. And to you listening to my story, remember this family betrayal can hide behind the kindest smile. Looking back, I ignored too many warning signs. Don't make my mistake of trusting blindly when someone isolates you from family or controls every aspect of your life. My father saw the family betrayal while I was blind to it. If someone's story keeps changing, if they discourage you from asking questions, those aren't small things. They're survival warnings you can't afford to miss. The lesson I learned is that family revenge isn't about hatred, it's about justice. When I discovered the truth, I could have stayed silent. But God put me through this for a reason so others could escape their own nightmare. Family betrayal taught me that some people wear masks so convincing you'll doubt your own instincts. But family revenge true justice means choosing courage over comfort. It means turning tragedy into protection for strangers who deserve what I nearly lost: freedom, truth, and a second chance at life. If this story moved you, please drop a comment below. Have you ever faced family betrayal or witnessed someone's courage in seeking family revenge? Share this video with someone who needs to hear that surviving is possible. And if you believe in stories of justice and truth, subscribe to Her Revenge for more. Your voice in the comments might be exactly what another survivor needs to read today. Thank you for staying until the very end. While certain details have been fictionalized for storytelling and privacy, the heart of this message, the lessons about recognizing danger and choosing justice, is real and important.